Call to order the Grand Traverse County Board of Commissioners special meeting, first round interviews for County Administrator for Wednesday, May 16th. If we could rise for the pledge, please.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, please, Bonnie.
Lathrop?
Yep.
Mayor?
Here.
Gorfulet?
Here.
Wheelock?
Yes, ma'am.
Klaus?
Here.
Johnson?
Present.
Crawford?
Here. Now is our chance for first public comment.
Cricket.
Do we have to still read the rules even though there's nobody out there?
No. I don't think so.
We're going to dispense with reading of the rules because I don't think our Record Eagle reporter wants to make a comment.
Are we recording?
Yes, we are. Okay, we are going to get started with first round interviews for Grand Traverse County Administrator. James.
All right. I'll briefly just go over a couple of things. Our first candidate is here and waiting, Mr. Steve Daly. Everyone has the questions in their packets. After each candidate, we're starting with candidate 2. If you could please ask your questions that are follow-up in nature to the prepared questions. After an answer comes from a prepared question, if you have a specific follow-up question to that question or that response, please indicate to the chair that you'd like to ask a follow-up question at that time, and she will recognize you. If you have an additional question that is not directly related to either the answer or the question asked, please hold those to the end, and we will have time for commissioners to ask questions, additional questions at the end that were not prepared. As noted in our other meeting, our prior meeting, none of the questions have been provided to the candidates, so these are all fresh questions for the candidates. But again, if you want to ask questions beyond the prepared, if they are related, please ask them during the appropriate time. If they're not related, please ask them at the end. I'd encourage everyone to take very good notes. I know that probably is without saying, but since we're over 2 nights, it will be really important tomorrow evening at the end when we discuss that we were able to reference our notes in those discussions. I would encourage you to not discuss candidates until the very end, and we will leave time after the last candidate tomorrow to have a full facilitated discussion. Finally, we need to please keep in mind what the goal of these 6 interviews are. The goal of these 6 interviews is to develop a short list of candidates we will bring back for a public interview and then another interview in front of the commission. So our goal of these 6 isn't to pick your next administrator, it is to pick the candidates to bring back for another round of interviews that are set for that first week of June already. Is everyone comfortable with what I've laid out, or any questions that you may have?
Do you think there will be time for each one of us to answer or ask an additional question?
I would think so.
No? Okay.
We've scheduled 1 hour. I'm not one to say it has to be 60 for all. If we're comfortable at 45 and we're comfortable at 105, that is fair to the candidates if all questions are asked in that time. I would encourage us to not go about 1 hour and a quarter, but I do think everyone will have an opportunity to ask their questions. If we don't, remember, we do have these candidates back for another round. So if you're really interested in a question, but we're coming short, if it's not a determinant, if you want to bring the candidate back or not, you can use your individual discretion to that.
Are any of the candidates under any time constraint tonight? Any of them leaving on a flight that's...
I don't think so.
No.
Okay.
Okay. Dan?
I see a scoring system here. Is that binding in any way?
No, it is simply a note area for the commissioners. If you choose to use that and you want to use it to facilitate your thought process, great.
Okay.
And those are your notes sheets.
Okay, it won't be distributed amongst
It will not be distributed. Your notes are subject to the common Open Records Acts.
Right.
But it is not, I won't ask you what did you score candidate 1 or candidate 4. Our discussion will be more along the lines of which candidates do we want to bring back. Gotcha. So it is simply your notes, and you can use the scale, not use the scale, develop your own. That's just there for your assistance.
So you can use your check system. Right?
Okay. Okay.
Thank you.
Bring in the first candidate, please.
All right.
You notice I didn't take that chair.
You could have applied.
I don't know, we're a pretty scary bunch.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Hello.
Hello.
Hello, sir.
Just in case you're thirsty.
Hello.
Sonny Wheelock.
How are you, sir? Bob Johnson. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. Bob Close. Nice to meet you, sir.
Nice to meet you.
Hello.
Oh, nice to meet you.
Should I start right in, James, or do you have any sort of introduction or anything?
No, I think
go.
Mr. Daly introduced himself to you and you to him, so
Well,
you
okay.
can either go around and introduce yourself more formally or begin the questions.
We like to kind of go around and just introduce yourself and tell what you do besides being a commissioner, because we are other people.
That's special. I'm Sonny Wheelock. Been a Grand Traverse County Commissioner for older than the carpet is in the room, I think, almost 20 years.
Strong carpet.
I also own a welding fabricating company 9 miles west of Traverse City.
Bob Johnson, retired Coast Guard, was stationed Cape Cod for a few years. Now I currently work for Consumers Energy, County Commissioner for 4 years. This is my last term.
Hi, I'm Cheryl Follett. I've been on the commission for a year and a half. I'm a long-time, multiple-generation native, and in my private life, I'm an attorney.
I'm Carol Crawford. This is my 4th year as a county commissioner, and my 2nd year as the chair. I am also a full-time mom and a part-time accountant.
Hello, I'm Ron Klaus, 60-plus year resident, Grand Traverse County, general contractor, and been a commissioner for 4 years.
Dan Lathrop, I'm a practicing physician and surgeon. I'm the oldest person on this board, and I've been a commissioner for about 6 years.
I'm the second new commissioner. I'm Tom Mayer. I've lived here since '87. I have an old house in town. My wife and I are enjoying living here and really proud to be a member of the Grand Traverse County Board of Commissioners.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll get started. So we have your background materials in front of us, but if you could please begin by reviewing your professional career path and career goals. Additionally, based on your knowledge and understanding of this county, how are you a good fit for our county, and how is our county a good fit for you?
Those are good opening questions. Or requests.
We hope.
Well, as you can see from my resume, my career has been lengthy at this point. And I started out of college as a collegiate football coach in northern Wisconsin, lived in Duluth, Minnesota, so the north is no surprise to me, and I went to school in Maine. The world of college coaching at that time was not open to a lot of newcomers, and after a budget cut in Wisconsin, I had to go look for something else to do, and we moved back to Massachusetts, which was our home, looking for opportunities, and lo and behold, a government opportunity came up in a nearby town that I applied for. I got the job, and you might say the rest is history. It was a grant-funded program that was attempting to install administrative leadership in local government, and I was one of, I think, a half a dozen in Massachusetts who were funded by that grant. From there, I went on to another small town in a similar position, and apparently got discovered because I moved from a town of, I think it was 4,000 to 6,000 to one of 36,000. And it took me 2.5 years to get there. I was very welcomed in that community. I was able to do a lot of good things in that community. My role was what they called in Massachusetts Executive Secretary to the Board of Selectmen. The Board of Selectmen is the governing body of local government in Massachusetts. And I had no authority, but I was the go-between between the board and the department heads who reported directly to them. So that's part of the fit that I think is really good here in Grand Traverse County. Is it Traverse or Traverse?
Traverse.
Grand Traverse County.
Thank you. That sort of relationship building and collaborative working with other high-level staff has been something that I've embraced and made good with throughout my career. In Massachusetts, we have a lot of elected officials who either sit on boards or are individual department heads, and it doesn't really matter in most cases whether you have a chief executive officer or chief administrative officer who's appointed by the governing body. There are usually the elected officials that you have to work with. So that collaboration and ability to get along with people who don't report to you is a strength, and it's a necessity there, and it's a strength of mine. I worked through that position in Needham, Massachusetts, and gee, I think it was maybe 3 years later or 4 years later, another position opened up which I applied for and got, which I was encouraged to apply for, and I became a chief administrative officer. And it was the first position in my career where I had authority of any kind, and I exercised it fairly and cautiously. That was a role that I filled for 4 years, was very successful at it, led a reorganization of the financial departments because they were all separate departments at the time. I organized them into one finance department, which after we put together some sound financial management policies, was the first community in Massachusetts after the referendum passage of its tax limitation legislation to achieve a AAA rating from Moody's. That was quite nice. It was a feather in everybody's cap. I also won an innovation award at the state level for what we then called the East Bedford Industrial Sewer District, which was a collaboration between local government and business interests to update and expand a sewer system that since then has been operated by the East Bedford Industrial Sewer District, who paid off their bonds decades ago and don't know what to do with the surplus. So I think they're just waiting for the need to redo some of the sewer system. But it was a project that alleviated major overflows in downstream communities. The one in particular was Lexington, Massachusetts, and we all know about Lexington and the shot heard around the world. They didn't like getting what Bedford had to deliver to them. But then something happened in my career. An opportunity came along that caused me to change horses. I had been a lifelong racing fan, an IndyCar racing fan in particular, and through my door walked two gentlemen from the Detroit Grand Prix who wanted to stage an IndyCar race at Hanscom Air Force Base next door to, well, actually it was in Bedford. And I worked with them for a whole year, working with the communities around Bedford, getting making presentations and getting the boards of selectmen there to endorse the idea of doing this race. And they were all in favor of it, but when it went to the authority that was responsible for governing the public side of the Air Force Base, it was scuttled. And there was no recourse, and as a result, these gentlemen decided to go elsewhere and try to do their work, and they invited me to go with them. And I talked to my wife about it, and she said, if you don't do it, you'll always regret it, so go ahead and give it a shot. And the three of us spent the next 2 years, I think it was, maybe 2.5, working on trying to site races in different cities in Massachusetts and other states. And after 2.5 years, we all went broke and had to go back to work for somebody else. And that's when a company in Bedford, Massachusetts knocked on my door and asked me to go to Ohio and be their second in command of a public-private partnership with the city of Akron and the county of Summit, We were operating a trash incinerator that produced steam that heated and cooled downtown Akron. I signed on there, went to Ohio, traveled back and forth by plane on weekends for a whole year, and then finally the company moved me and my family out there. We were there for the next 3 years, I think, until the EPA decided that public incinerator ash was a hazardous waste, and it increased the per ton cost of processing trash from, I think it was about $40 a ton to $140 a ton. The City of Akron decided they were going to close the plant down and run it on gas only. So out of 125 of us, 30 remained after that decision, and the rest of us had to go look for work, which brought me back to Massachusetts. And I took a public management job in Massachusetts in the town that I live in now, and was I think their third administrator, which was actually a chief executive officer position. And after 6.5 years, I had been their longest tenured administrator in a community, excuse me, in a community where the throats get dry. In a community where the person in the administrator's position was always an election football. And people ran on whether to keep the administrator or to fire the administrator. I was there for 6.5 years, and eventually I was taken out by those who wanted to fire the administrator. No real reason. They had issues with the board based on the decisions that they were making, but I was their guy and they wanted their own guy coming in. So from there, I moved on to Salem, New Hampshire, and asked one of my friends as a colleague to congratulate the next former town manager of Salem, New Hampshire, where Salem had a reputation of hiring and firing town managers. I was in Salem for 4 years, which was then the second longest tenure in Salem's history. The person who followed me was there 10 months. The person after that was there 1.5 years. So I did okay, and accomplished a lot of good things that the Board of Selectmen had laid out as a list of priorities for things they wanted to accomplish with me in the manager's chair. From there, after having been beaten up several times and deciding that that was enough of that, I did some consulting for a year or so, and eventually was recruited to take on the role that I started in Boston at the Metropolitan Area Planning Council to rescue a failing collective or collaborative purchasing program that they had started a year or so earlier, and it just wasn't going anywhere. I took that on, worked from my house and worked from another location for about a year, and then moved into Boston, and you can see from my resume the progression there was pretty profound. I went from collective purchasing for public works materials and services to purchasing vehicles for police, public works, and fire uses, and then adding to that Homeland Security support for the 4 Homeland Security regions within Massachusetts outside of Greater Boston. And I grew a business that started off as about, $1 million, $1.5 million a year in activity, up to over $70 million in activity. And it funded, the profits from that enterprise funded a lot of the planning efforts of the rest of the agency. We grew in that time from 38 employees to just under 90. And after all that time, after 14 years, I had an itch that I had to scratch, and it was to get back into local government, because where I was doing what I was doing, it was going so well that there wasn't that much to do, and there weren't that many other opportunities to take advantage of. So I wanted to get back at the ground level and do something positive where I could actually see the results rather than count the cash. So I reached out to some colleagues that I knew, and they pointed me to a job in Bedford, New Hampshire. I applied for that job, went through the interview process, was hired into it, and thought that it was a wonderful job. It was one that Everybody was happy with the way things that were going, and they had wonderful staff, and they just wanted someone to sort of watch the clock and maintain the operation. Well, in the course of a year and a half, I found out that that's not me. I'm not a maintainer. I'm a designer and a builder and a change agent, and I enjoy that. To maintain something is really somebody else's job. Over that period of time, even though I was attempting to be aggressive and innovative and entrepreneurial within that community, there was resistance to that. And I was there for 2 elections. The first election was the first week that I started on the job, and one of the 7-member councilors stepped down in that election and was replaced by one who was an ally of 2 others on the council. The next election, 2 others stepped down, and 2 more were elected who were allies of the minority on the council that hired me. I found out later that that minority of 2 people in the beginning did not want to hire me, and once they got the majority of the council, they decided to hire somebody else. Now, I had a problem also in that they had a residency requirement that required me to move in there within 18 months of being hired, and we weren't able to find a housing that we could afford within the community that was available in that 18-month period, or the 15 months that I was there. So the handwriting was sort of on the wall, but it ended, and it ended just fine. We both moved on to better things, I guess. And then I worked for a consulting firm named Municipal Resources, Inc. I'm telling you my whole life story here.
That's okay. You might be answering some of the questions that are coming up
I was
later.
going to say, we
so
have
that's
10
fine.
questions and
We're good.
35 minutes, so.
I think you're
Oh,
close.
okay.
I think you're close, so good. Continue.
But I did some consulting work, and you've seen that in my resume, and then I stood in as a town administrator, which is the chief executive officer position, in Derry, New Hampshire for 9 months while they looked for another person, and because they weren't able or weren't willing to pay the buyout fee in the contract, they said that they regretted that they couldn't hire me because they just chose not to buy me out of that contract. So, since then, I've been working as a financial manager for the Concord, Massachusetts Municipal Light Plant, which is a public utility in Concord, Mass. 8,000 customers and $27 million a year in activity. And I've been trying to learn about debits and credits. It's maddening. You know about debits and credits.
I do, and it's lovely.
Budgets and project management, I understand that, and I can do that very, very well, but debits and credits throw me.
Okay.
So that's how I got here,
Okay.
and I'll be happy to answer any questions you have.
Anybody have any follow-up with that?
Oh, I'm sorry.
I
Go
was just
ahead.
going to thank you for traveling so far.
Yes.
Thank you for coming.
No.
Yeah,
I have a quick question.
the agony is that I have to go back.
I'm kind of confused about, it says that you are, or have worked, or are working for GovHR.
Yes.
Working for them now?
I'm working in their GovTemps organization. They placed me in the Concord position that I've been in for 8 months, and there doesn't seem to be any end to that, but this is still where I'd rather be.
So I just want to understand it. GovHR hires you as a consultant and places you where you need to go? Is that how it works?
I suppose you could say that. I'm not consulting, though. I'm working in a position that would normally be filled by a regular municipal employee.
So what does GovHR have to do with that? Did they find that for you? And
They found me
okay.
when they got the contract for that
Gotcha.
position. They found me, had me interview, and
And do you
they
work
decided
for
to bring
them
me on.
now, though? Do you get a paycheck from GovHR?
I do.
Okay. And then who pays you for the work you're doing at the municipal light plant? Do they give you a check as well?
No, that's GovHR that pays me for
Gotcha.
that.
Okay.
They charge the municipal light plant for me doing the work, and then they pay me.
How long have you been working for GovHR?
Since September.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Bob? go ahead.
Yeah, we'll roll into another question if we can. one that, because you said something that kind of piqued my interest, and one of our questions, actually it's the last one, so I'm just throwing it out there.
That's
but-
fine, go ahead.
Yeah, if selected as the next county administrator, what do you predict your tenure would be with the statement that you said you're not a maintainer, roughly paraphrasing that? Because ideally, you know, if the administrator is good, they're gonna get to a point where they're growing the county some, but also there is a lot of maintenance that goes with that. So is that gonna be an issue? Are you gonna be here 2 years, or?
No, I'm looking for at least 5 years and hopefully 10. I don't see a conflict there because I sense from what I've read about your county and the discussions I've had with James and watching some of your commission meetings, that there's a fair amount of work to do. And I can see an opportunity, especially after driving around the county yesterday, for a lot of entrepreneurial efforts to be undergone by the county itself. And I think that would keep me very interested, as well as some of the internal issues that need to be dealt with. And they're not things that can be solved with the snap of a finger, and they're going to happen next week. So it'll take effort, take time, and especially when we start talking about succession planning and positioning people for succession and that sort of thing. That happens over a fairly long period of time.
Okay, we're going to move on. Describe the process that you would follow, you may have already done this, some of this, to comprehensively evaluate our current operations in the county and develop some innovative improvements. You kind of started to answer that, so.
What's something you observed in one of our meetings that got you interested?
Well, let me see. I think it was your most recent meeting where you had a projected liability of, was it $2.8 million in your OPEB, and that suddenly changed to $1.2 million?
Or something. 7 or 8 and went down to 2.4.
Okay, yeah, it was a drastic difference. And I can say that if I'm your county administrator, that's not going to happen. You're not going to see those kinds of swings in numbers that are reported to you. If the numbers are that pliable, they're not coming to you until they settle down and we know exactly what the numbers are and they can be backed up. Your financial management, your fiscal strategies, your fiscal policies, I think, all need review and consideration for new adoptions or modifications that are going to set you up in the bonding community for good reports and for improving your bond rating over time. With those kinds of numbers coming out publicly, that's not going to happen. So we'll settle that down pretty quickly.
Okay. The county administrator has the opportunity to work with the elected board, independent commissions and authorities, elected officials with operational responsibility, and appointed employees. If you could provide us with your past experience in managing complex organizations and maybe outline your approach to coordinating a team with various levels of autonomy and independence.
That's a long question. How long of an answer do you want?
Okay, let's see.
He's answered a lot of this already.
Yeah.
You actually have. You actually have answered a lot of that.
Working with independent authorities is something that I've done my entire career. And even at the 14 years at MAPC, I worked with an association called the Greater Boston Police Council with a board of 12 police chiefs and a membership of 300 people that had to be talked to from time to time about the benefits of the program that we were offering. And I worked directly with their board. I worked directly with the board of the Fire Chiefs Association of Massachusetts, another 300-member organization.
Maybe I could ask a follow-up question.
I don't have an issue with working at multiple levels.
I guess I would like to know, how would you envision getting yourself up to speed with what's happening in Grand Traverse County? What would your strategy be to find out what's going on, within the organization, and maybe you could give an example of something that you did to move one of your organizations forward in that process.
Sure, I'll be happy to. My approach to it would be to meet with the various layers of managers within the organization, and you have 37 departments? That's a question I'm going to ask later on, by the way.
Yeah.
We got a lot.
We have a lot of
Got a
different
lot.
departments,
Yeah.
yes.
So
13 separate
I'll
bargaining units.
I'll meet with each member of the senior staff to find out what's going on based on their perspective, not only of their own departments and responsibilities, but the entire organization. And I'll let them know then that I intend to meet with their subordinates as well and get their perspective on what's going on. I'll be meeting with every one of you to find out what your perspective is and what your priorities are as far as the organization and its workings are concerned. And I'll probably meet with the press to find out why they are or aren't reporting on organizational issues and what they see as hot points for the county, because if we can address those in some way, then my goal would be to make an ally of the press. And I think that's a good way to do it. I'll also go down to the street level and talk with the work crews, the sheriffs, the deputy sheriffs on the street, and just do that randomly and get a sense of what they think of the organization, where they think the trouble points are, what they think is good and bad about it. I think that that's something I need to do internally. Externally, aside from the press, I'll be talking with the business associations and the community associations, the different villages and townships within the county to find out what concerns them and pleases them about the county's services and delivery. So, the first 6 months is going to be a lot of learning.
We're going to move on to describe the process you would utilize to recruit and select talented staff.
What
We already
number is
have-
that?
We're going to number 7.
Oh, you were jumping, okay.
I am.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm just, yeah.
Well, the first
How would you do
decision
that?
to make is whether or not to hire a recruiter. And once that decision is made, the process that I would envision is a public advertising and also feelers put out through professional associations for that particular role that we're trying to fill. And maybe also advertisements in their publications or over their websites, that sort of thing. Everybody today is looking at websites to find job opportunities, and we want to take advantage of that. We'll use Indeed, we'll use a variety of different websites that just publish job opportunities and then filter back through candidates that meet the minimum criteria so that we're dealing with pre-qualified candidates as opposed to candidates that, just decide to throw something at us and spend our time rejecting it. Beyond that, it's important to understand or to determine whether the professionals in our organization are aware of who the applicants are and what their qualities and qualifications are. That will give us some insight, or give the hiring process some insight into the relative quality of the different candidates. Beyond that, after the screening of these candidates, I think that bring semifinalists in for an interview similar to what you're doing now with the HR department, the department head, one or two other leaders within the organization to get different perspectives, preferably those that have some relationship in an operating sense to the department that's doing the hiring. And then finally, bring the finalists in for an interview that would result in a recommendation to me as to who their preferred candidate is. And then I would interview that person, and if I'm not comfortable with that person, then I would want to interview one or two more. but I would bow to the preferences and insights of the department managers in most cases, because they know their business better than I do. But my focus will be on how well I think that person would assimilate into the organization, and how enthusiastic and energetic I perceive that person to be, with the assumption at the beginning, or the assumption at that point, that their ability to do the job is already determined. Once satisfied among 2 or 3 top candidates, then I would approve hiring.
Sonny, did you have a follow-up to
Well,
that?
I think the follow-up that I have in that regard is that what we find in our community, whether it be at the county or every business and industry in our community, we simply cannot find the workforce to fill the jobs. You know, I had a jail ad hoc committee last night meeting talking about how severe our shortage of corrections officers are. You know, we went without an HR director for nearly a year, went without an IT director for nearly a year, went for an extended period of time without a finance director. We have had huge issues in filling not only low-level positions, but high-level positions in this community. And, you know, that is always frustrating for everyone. It's easy to say, well, you know, we're gonna vet all the candidates and we're going to interview all the candidates, but that's assuming that those candidates are coming forward to you. And what we have seen in our community is the shortage of those even nearly qualified candidates.
That's a problem of a different kind. And it's not an easy one to solve, because it tends to be systemic in nature. But you start with defining why people aren't applying, which is not an easy thing to do, but if you can determine why with some reasonable confidence, then you can address those reasons. It could be, just by way of example, it could be a shortage in their minds of affordable housing. It could be the compensation levels that are being offered. It could be something about this organization that is in the rumor mill or in the undercurrent in their profession that suggests to them that they don't want to work here. But we have to find out what those things are so that we can address them. You want to, just as you are a desirable place to visit and recreate and spend your summers in, you know, the Traverse City and the county reek of that kind of an attraction. Reek probably isn't the right word. They abound with that type of attraction.
That's very nice, thank you.
Reek, I don't know.
Those things don't necessarily bring people here, but if we can sell that as why people should come here to work, that would be an advantage, and it could be a successful strategy in part. I would want to look at the compensation levels being offered at the county level. I would want to look at the working conditions, the morale within the various departments, the leadership of the various departments, and the tone that they set for employees. I want to look at the tenure history of people in all the departments in general, but mostly in those positions that are turning over, and whether or not they're turning over more often than they really should, and why they're turning over. Are people going to higher paying jobs or jobs in other areas of the state or the country that they would prefer to be in? Are the winters too harsh? Well, get over it.
Exactly.
You know, there are a lot of things to look at and analyze. It's a kaleidoscope of information that you have to put together and try to overcome as much as you can.
I also have a follow-up to this one. You said something earlier about succession planning. Do you have a particular theory on succession planning or filling jobs from within, mentoring and grooming people?
Well, succession planning can be one of the keys to this problem that Mr. Wheelock just cited. if people know that they're more or less the next one up, or that job, that position will come to them at some point in time, whether it's by departure of the senior or retirement, then that's an incentive to stay. You saw it in Detroit when, was it Detroit? No, it wasn't Detroit. You saw it in Indianapolis when Josh McDaniels, the offensive coordinator of the Patriots, turned down the job because he was told that he was going to be Bill Belichick's successor. No reaction? Sorry.
That's okay.
I know it's the Patriots, but...
That's okay.
But those things are the kinds of things that keep people around. And hiring or promoting from within, I think, is a good practice, so long as you have the right people to promote. And that's a function of training, experience, mentoring of those people, continuing education of them, and giving them experience in all of the different areas of that department, so that when they are ready to succeed, the senior person in that department or the next person up the ladder from them, they know what that next person's job is about, and they're able to transition into it fairly easily, and they're going to get the financial reward that comes with it, and the prestige. And they'll be at a higher level of the team that solves problems and makes decisions.
Bob?
If somebody was to look you up online, what would they find? And would it be anything good or bad, or
No.
different? I mean,
Probably
it's the
neither.
typical political spectrum. Obviously, you can throw that out, but
Most of what you'll see, I think, has to do with my role at MAPC. So,
are you involved in the Miss Dig at all there?
pardon me?
The
Was
Big
it the
Dig?
Big Dig?
The Big Dig.
not Miss Dig. That's who we call
No,
for
that was a while
flagging.
ago.
That was
It's a
long
big
time.
bad dig.
Yeah.
The one that went from 4 billion to 16 billion, then went to 21 billion after that. And it shows you it's not wise always to dig under a city. By the way, we did not have any involvement in that. That was a state-level project. But they say that the Big Dig is a big success because now you can pass under Boston in 5 minutes. That's true. But from 10 miles away, south or north or west, it still takes you an hour and a half to get there. And then you get 5 minutes of pleasure.
Do you have anything to say about labor contracts and collective bargaining?
I have a lot to say about that.
We have 13 different bargaining units. And it's
Plus
kind of
two
a continuous
associations.
process of,
Yeah,
yeah.
not surprised. I've worked with unions since my third job. No, my second job. In fact, I was part of a union grievance where we reorganized the police department and eliminated a sergeant's position, and they grieved it, and it all culminated with somebody driving up on my front yard with their headlights shining in the front window of the house, and the next morning my wife found a dead pig in the mailbox. So that was not a very good start in
had a big
union
mailbox.
relations. Well, it was little, baby.
Oh, yikes, fetal.
Yeah.
The last job that I've dealt with unions throughout, as many as 7. The last position I was in Derry, New Hampshire, when I arrived, they had 7 union contracts, all of which were out of contract at that time, and the 2 most egregious were 6 years out of contract. By the time I left, I had worked with 2 of the counselors to put in the HR department and the department heads to put together a package for offering them a different health insurance plan that the town would save enough money on their share of the health insurance plan to pay for the next 5 years of pay increases at an average of, I think it was 3% per year over that 5-year period, as well as catching up in a reasonable manner for the previous 2 to 6 years. And as I was leaving the last council meeting I attended, they signed the last contract. So that was quite an accolade for everybody involved. And the town didn't spend any more money than it was going to spend on covering its share of their health insurance program. And they ran it out 5 years. So I have a lot of experience with unions, win a lot of grievances, win arbitrations, even won an unfair labor practice complaint one time.
Did you work with legal counsel doing that, or was it?
Sure. Yeah,
Outside legal counsel?
Yes, yeah, you don't want to step
Right.
in those traps if you don't have legal
So you believe in
counsel.
outside legal counsel for dealing with unions?
I can't hear you.
You believe in the use of outside legal counsel in dealing with unions?
Oh, yes.
You wouldn't do it on your own?
I would not be the front person. I would be the last person
Okay.
that they see in collective bargaining, because ultimately the decisions come to me, and then I believe they probably come to you, because it involves appropriation and that sort of thing. But I think it's appropriate, if there's going to be discourse at the bargaining table, that it not involve the chief executive officer, because I have to lead the entire organization in a positive way, and if I'm seen as a fist fighter at the bargaining table, I can't do that effectively. And if I'm not a fist fighter at the bargaining table, which I have been many times in the past, then I'm seen as weak and easily rolled over. And I still can't run the organization well if that happens. So I need to maintain the integrity of my role.
I want a follow-up question on that.
Go ahead.
So, do you think that the negotiator has to be an attorney, or could it be someone else in the organization, like someone in HR, or if you had a deputy administrator who had a law degree, or is there some intrinsic value in your mind to paying for outside counsel to do that negotiating for you?
I would say in an unusual case, an internal person could work. I would not use HR, because HR is supposed to be a supporter of the employees, providing benefits counseling and being the one that they lean on when they're having troubles and that sort of thing. I wouldn't put them in that position. If they're, I've used them at the bargaining table before as kind of a balancing force, and it can work depending on who the HR person is. I've used it before when it's been a disaster because of who the HR person was. I would prefer not to do that, but I would certainly put the finance director at the table, because the finance director is going to know the numbers and be able to counsel the negotiator on that side of the issue. The department head would be there to counsel the negotiator on the non-economic issues of the bargaining. I think it's important and valuable to have an attorney, a labor attorney, do the face-to-face bargaining, because as long as that person is in sync with the attitude and the demeanor that we want to project to the unions and the employees in general, it works. When that's not the case, when that person has their own agenda or their own baggage with the unions, it doesn't work at all, and I've been in both of those situations.
Thank you.
When can we ask independent questions?
I have just one more.
All right.
Excuse me, there was one thing I wanted to add to that response.
Okay.
I think it's important to have a lawyer there, not just because of their bargaining experience and expertise perhaps, but because they'll know right away whether or not something can be done within the law. And they can easily toss things out that just would be illegal if they were done. And I think that's valuable at the table.
Trying to combine these two, but I really can't. But if you were offered this position, is there anything that would cause you not to accept the position? Any obstacles that you see that you would say, whoa, I can't do it?
Well, I would ask Mr. Wheelock what the obstacles are.
Well, some people think I am.
No, I could add on to that.
Go ahead.
You mentioned before about you couldn't find affordable housing. That
Yes.
could be an issue here.
We've looked.
I mean,
Okay.
you can find reasonable once you get outside of the city proper, but that could be a hindrance. I know housing has been pretty hot in this market, but.
But you have researched that
We've
already?
looked and we're comfortable.
Okay.
Yeah.
And a time frame by which you might be available if the position was offered to you?
I would have to give the organization that I'm working in right now probably no less than 30 days' notice, maybe a little bit more, because we're going through year-end closings and reports to federal authorities and that sort of thing. And I seem to be a key piece of that.
Okay.
By the
Some
way,
of these were already answered, so.
the information I told you before about not being able to find affordable housing in Bedford, New Hampshire, the median price of houses in Bedford, New Hampshire is about $600,000. And there wasn't anything under $400,000 that was available.
Great. So we're going to, I'm keeping mindful of the time, we're going to open it up. And who has a
Okay.
question? Go ahead, Dan.
Thank you for coming. You're giving a great interview.
Well, thank you.
What concerns me is that when I look at your career, a lot of the numbers in terms of employees and populations and budgets are really much smaller than what we have here. And that's kind of a quantum leap for you to come from where you've been to this. How can you give me confidence that you can make that quantum leap?
I'll look back on my 14 years at MAPC, which is a regional planning agency, and you're familiar with what those are, that is comprised of 101 municipalities and 5.6 million people. And during my 14 years, I worked with multiple groups of municipal officials representing populations, well over hundreds of thousands. I don't think that it's going to be an issue. You have several villages and several townships in the county that all have their elected leaderships, and integrating or building positive working relationships with each of them is something that I would look forward to. In a way, your jurisdiction is 600 square miles, but you're comprised of this number of communities, and I see it no different than working with that many communities in Massachusetts.
The job you just mentioned, were you the CEO of that particular group?
No, I was one level down.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
Anybody else have a particular question that's not on our list or anything? Tom, we'll go around the room.
Well, I might have jumped the gun by asking the labor collective bargaining
That's
one.
okay.
but
Anything
That
else?
was very interesting. Well, for quite some time now, we haven't, well, I should say, one of the first things that occurred to me when I was running for the job was what happens in our HR department. Now, we did have a HR director who did negotiating, and she left. And then we had a sort of unstable leadership in our HR department. I have a belief, from an academic point of view, college, university, that you need an HR director if you're running an organization this size. We have approximately 500 employees. And yet, for one reason or another, like one administrator not staying long enough, to be able to fill that job or get that job done, we wait for the next administrator to make that choice, because the administrator chooses the department heads. What do you think of our HR department, if you've read about it at all? And right now, I think we're up to 4 employees. We just added one. But we don't have a director.
4 is not a bad number, but with, how many unions did you say? 13?
13
13
different
unions.
Bargaining units and 2.
Yeah, so you have 13 labor contracts that all have to be administered. And I would say that you need a strong department head there, a well experienced person who has a breadth of experience as well as depth. And you're probably going to have to pay for that person, because there aren't that many available for organizations this size. I haven't read much about your HR department, but its absence in this process tells me something.
It's noticeable, right? Yeah,
Pardon me?
it's noticeable.
Yeah.
No.
Ron, did you have
I'm good.
anything? You're good?
Yeah.
Cheryl?
I'm just curious about your desire to have a deputy underneath you. Do you feel that that's a given, that you would have to have a deputy in this position? There have been some administrators that have had a deputy. There have been some administrators that haven't had a deputy. Right now, of course, obviously, there isn't one. So is that something that you would think you would need to do right away, or would you want to see how things shook out, or what's your feeling?
I've watched those meetings.
Yeah, okay.
And it's interesting that you sort of put on the two sides of the balance a deputy administrator and an economic development director. Given those choices, I would go with the economic development director, because one of the things I've read is among your priorities is to boost the economic development effort made by the county. And with a 600 square mile area and all of the different things that are going on here, and then the effort that it will take to recruit companies to come and set up in Grand Traverse County, that's a full-time job. I'll be happy to be the point person, not the point person, but the cheerleader for that effort, and to welcome the people into the community and help get obstacles out of their way as they move through whatever regulatory processes we have. But I think you are suffering from not having somebody who's constantly out there working to recruit new businesses into the area and working with the existing businesses to expand their operations. It doesn't, economic development or economic prosperity doesn't fall into everybody's laps like it did to Elkhart, Indiana. And if you've read anything about Elkhart, Indiana lately, they have 4,500 unfilled jobs that are in or supporting their RV manufacturing industry there. They're paying $15 an hour for common laborers to start the work, and they're paying bonuses to people who stay more than a month. And they're paying higher bonuses for people that stay 6 months. They can't keep people in the jobs because it's tough work, but they also can't hire people into the jobs. It's a similar problem to what you've described, but their issues seem to be more around the difficulty of the work and the pace of it. I think that a deputy administrator is nice, but not necessarily necessary, and I'll reserve judgment on that, and until I've had more to work with for information. But as I would expect, as your county administrator, if I'm absent for any period of time, I can designate an interim or an acting administrator who would effectively be the deputy administrator. And with 37 departments, 37 department heads, I can probably find somebody.
Maybe. Go
I want
ahead.
to follow up. Do you think that's a good scope of command then, for you to look at 37
No.
departments?
No,
So why wouldn't you want a deputy administrator? I'm just asking.
I would want fewer departments
Yeah.
and put that responsibility for supervision on,
I think there actually are fewer departments.
put that,
Well, there's still a lot.
put that responsibility for supervising the smaller departments on senior staff and reorganize the organization so that those smaller departments report to someone at a senior level. The typical configuration would look like finance, public safety, public works, and probably social services, maybe public health. Public safety would include, I want to say
sheriff?
confinement, but that's not right, corrections.
The jail.
It would include corrections and policing.
Could include
The court
central
system would,
dispatch.
pardon me?
Could include central dispatch and a couple other things.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. if I'm your guy, then I'll bring you a plan, and we'll discuss it until we beat it to death, I'm sure.
Awesome. Sunny?
But
did you
I'm
have-
not touching the judges.
Smart.
No, we don't either.
Well,
We don't-
that is a key distinction, because of our multitude of departments and 13 separate bargaining units, we have to remember that a number of our 500 county employees are co-employees, because they are actually under the control and the direction of other elected officials, whether it
Yes.
be the county clerk, the circuit court judges, the district court judges, or the sheriff. So that makes a whole nother
Layer.
level of discussion when you start talking about labor contracts. I've sat here long enough to have spent time to negotiate contracts with the circuit court judges organization, their circuit court employees, and had the chief circuit court judge rip it in half and lay it on the desk. Yep, been there, done that.
Sunny is our resident historian.
A couple little.
There's a
pieces
reason the
of
courts are in different buildings, you know.
Yeah, a couple little discussions. One of the questions has to do with dealing with the press. Matt's here, and he's not going to like my comment much, but many times we get zero or very little favorable press from our local,
Stunning.
It's not necessarily unusual. We get very little credit for the things that we do well, but we get a lot of ink for the things that someone determined that we did wrong. And have you had any experience dealing with that?
Sure.
Tell me about something.
Of course. Reporters that have an agenda show themselves pretty quickly and pretty easily. And you just have to be careful with those people. But you can't be closed-mouthed. You can't be uninformative. I find it best to have regular meetings, maybe weekly, with the press. And if there's more than one reporting organization involved, I'll meet with all of them together. But that's the way I establish a rapport with them, and I've been at this long enough and made enough mistakes that I know what to say and what not to say. So I'm very comfortable with working with the press. I think that the way you create a positive image through the press is to not press their buttons and to not do things that you know they're going, well, I shouldn't say this. You should know ahead of time if what you're about to do is going to set off a firestorm in the press. And in that way, you can attempt through public communication, going around the media, to inform the public about what you're doing and what your reasoning is and why it's a good thing for the county, and then go ahead and do it. But you've laid the groundwork for positive feedback, even though the press might see it as a negative action on your part. It's also worthwhile to have a good sense through research or, just keeping your ear to the rail, so to speak, as to what the public is going to not react well to. And that's one of the reasons that the 7 of you are here, because you all represent different areas of the county, and I'm sure that you're in contact with your constituencies to the extent that you know if things are going to be seen by them as a good idea, a bad idea, good decision, bad decision. And, part of my role is going to be to promote your decisions, your anticipated actions throughout the community, and I'll do it with the business community, with the social community, with the educational community, and I'll do it wherever it's necessary to do that, because part of my role, and a major part of my role, is helping you succeed. So we have to work together as a team in that way. And if the press gives me a really bad time, I'm sending them to you.
Awesome.
They know exactly where I'm at. I guess the only last comment that I have, I want to talk just a little bit about longevity.
Sure.
My goal sitting here, I can't believe it, but I am conducting interviews for the 6th county administrator in the length of time I've been elected here. I truly want to find an administrator that's going to be here for 10 years and maintain stability within this community. No. And I want you to tell me that you're that guy that's going to be here 10 years and bring stability to this organization.
I wouldn't be sitting here if that wasn't my intent.
Thank you.
Do you have any questions for us? We have a few minutes left.
Well, my first question was, why 37 departments?
Well, it's,
That's
It's
my
really
question,
not that
too.
bad.
yeah.
well, yeah.
It's not quite
I don't
that
mind the
many.
37 departments, I mind the 13 bargaining units.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, yeah, that's a problem, too.
Sort of
How many do you think?
a snowball effect, probably.
It's uncontrolled evolution?
Yeah, that would be a good way to put it.
Okay. And I'd like to get a little bit of insight from each of you who wants to respond as to what you think the primary, two things, what you think the primary quality of your next administrator should be, and then what you think their primary role is in the county. The reason I asked that question is that in one of your meetings, I heard you talking about a charter. And I heard you discussing whether or not you should hire, as the board, a deputy administrator, or you should let the administrator hire their own person, or if it should be administrator recommendation to you for confirmation. Pardon my observation and my directness, but you seem to be all over the place. And that's not something that I think is becoming of you as a governing body. I think that roles and responsibilities should be clearly defined between you and the administrator, and that the working relationship should be based on that, and that once that's defined and maybe agreed upon, then we can work in that relationship and work on that relationship over time in a way that it becomes productive not only for me as the administrator, but you as the commissioners and you as a board of commissioners. It would identify your level of authority, responsibility, and governance, and it would define my responsibility and my role. And I think that's where we would have to start.
So I can answer that. I don't usually talk first, but I will on this, with this one. I think we've talked about it here earlier in the hour, stability. I think is a big factor in what's been happening, where we're kind of all over the board. I think we sometimes, to be honest, kind of second guess ourselves a little bit. Well, that should be the administrator, but since we don't have a permanent administrator, should we do that? And so it is sort of a function of the instability that we've had over the past almost year.
Actually, over the last 5 years.
Yeah, yeah. So you're absolutely correct. It does need to be more clearly defined, and we need to be a united front, not always agreeing, but definitely behind whatever is the general impetus of the county board. So we need stability. We definitely need stability in someone who is willing to stand up and say, I am the leader, and here's what we're going to do.
And we're both looking for that.
Okay.
Thank you.
I'm not speaking for everyone, I'm just me, but I'd like to see somebody that is willing to, at times, resist what we want if he thinks he knows better. I'm not saying say no to us, but you have a lot of experience, and there might be times we need your instruction. And also somebody that will not let himself be bullied by any one or two commissioners, that looks to direction from the whole board versus any one or two strong personalities. How do you feel about that?
Well, my understanding and I guess requirement in taking this job would be that you speak as a board, not as individuals, even though I'll develop a working relationship with all of you, or each of you, I respond to the board, not to individuals. And I think that we can work very, very well that way, because one of my roles will be to help you reach decisions as a board, help drive consensus among you, help each of you understand, if you're not so inclined, other commissioners' points of view, and help get you to that good place where you're making sound decisions without public boxing matches.
Fair enough. Ron?
This is just, I'm not speaking for the board either, but.
I didn't ask you to.
With me, it would be having an administrator that can take care of the department heads, answer their questions. If you did have commissioners going over your head or around you to, not saying they can't talk to department heads, but trying to intervene to put a stop to it. That's what I would expect out of an administrator, not to not just sit there and take it on the chin from other commissioners.
Of course, that never happens.
That's correct, yes.
And you know that an organizational
I never
chart
brought
is
it
like a
up.
pyramid, so you never go over the administrator's head. You undermine the administrator. And that's what happens when you go around the administrator. And some elected officials, and I'm not pointing fingers at anybody here, but my experience has been that there are elected officials who will do that because they think they know better. They want it done their way. They want favors done for people that they know. And they have a multitude of reasons as to why they do that. In some cases, they don't have confidence in the administrator, or they don't like the administrator, so they're just sort of eating away at the foundation of the organization that's going to eventually topple the administrator. I have a two-step process in dealing with that. And by the way, the charters that I've worked under in New Hampshire in particular have language in them that forbids the elected officials from giving direct orders and making direct requests of town employees. And they have to work through the administrator. And there's also a law in New Hampshire, you're going to love this. There's a law in New Hampshire that if that happens, the administrator can go to the governing body, report that to the governing body, and the governing body must, under law, take a vote as to whether or not to dismiss that council member from the council.
Wow.
Of course, the next person they dismiss is the manager. But it never gets used, but it's on the books. My two-step process is, first I would talk to you, using you as an example.
It'd
I would
usually
talk
be
to-
him, you know.
Pardon me?
It would always be him.
Always?
You have to talk to, yeah.
Well, let's talk now.
Okay.
You can't do that because you're undermining me, you're undermining the authority of the position that I hold, you're undermining the authority of the entire board, because what I'm doing is carrying out the policies and the decisions of the Board of Commissioners. And it's important for the employees to understand that they respond to my leadership and my direction, not to anybody else's. And once you get in there and start putting employees in a position where they are troubled by having to decide whether to follow your lead or follow my lead or their department head's lead, you're being unfair to the employee, and you're also decaying the organizational integrity of the entire county. That's step one, so please stop. Step two is I go to the chair and I tell them that we're at step two and that the commission has to do something about this. And I'll have documentation as to what's going on with whom, about what, and that I've spoken to you. And then I put it in the commission's hands. What happens after that will tell me where I stand, too.
If I may interrupt.
Yeah, I was going to say,
it would be,
we're out of time.
I'd ask if we can kind of close and ask the chair to close this interview, and we'll be to the next. Thank you, Steve.
Okay, I think we're all good. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
For coming.
Thank you.
and spending time with us.
My pleasure.
Thank you. James, can we have a 5-minute break?
Oh, no.
Two?
I
Yeah,
growl
just
a lot.
Till 20 of you. Okay.
The
And I
growl
gotta
makes
talk to that
makes
student.
the picture in the record look better.
I said I had to talk to him, I'd sign his paper.
All right. Yeah, I'm pretty impressed, yeah.
Yeah, I'm gonna sign his paper.
Run out there.
I'm going.
Run,
Too late,
Forrest.
elevator's already
Yeah,
closed.
okay.
Oh, well. All right, I need some more coffee.
You showed up.
Where's the pizza?
Hi, Tom. You made the effort. We're doing interviews.
Okay, let's kick this thing so we can get out of here.
Going the wrong direction, Dan.
Your diet had to change?
He's headed.
I don't need a lot of that.
Not Sinton. No, they're in the blue room through the city.
Well, I got to work, so I can't.
Well, send Sarah to get you a couple of cookies.
We don't have time.
Will you get Dan a couple of cookies,
don't have
please?
Now you're directing employees. We can't have that.
I asked
That's my
nicely.
employee.
She's a friend of mine.
That's exactly what I was talking about.
Moving on.
I've been awful.
Our county
I'm using
administrator,
my political
Ron.
power to get a
I would've
cookie.
gone through my county administrator.
If we had one.
I can't talk to you till I've had a cookie. I'm sorry.
I want you to have a cookie, all right?
All right.
It's all right.
All right. We're going to get started, people.
Yes, ma'am.
Great.
Wow.
We've been sitting here ready to go.
Well-
This one might even be easier because we already know the candidate, you know?
We do.
So we don't
We
have to
are
ask some of the
familiar.
stupid questions.
So,
Exactly.
There are no stupid questions.
wow. Okay.
Is this recording going already?
It is.
Probably.
It is, and we're a punchy group. Okay, so we have Mr. Nate Alger with us.
Good evening.
Good evening. So we will get started. I have to make a note of the time because now we're really late. Okay. I'll start with the same question we had before. Yeah,
If I may,
go ahead. I'm open to it.
given that he's been here in the county for a while, there may be some of these questions that we probably
I
don't even
know.
really need to ask. And
If you have a
Others
question
that
you'd
we
like to
might
start with,
want.
go ahead.
yeah, actually, I'll ask this one. It's not on there.
All right.
Given your time here and watching, I don't know, this circus that we've had for the last year
Careful
and a
now.
half or whatever, it's in a good way.
Okay.
What do you really see as one of the primary concerns that we have in this county?
I think one of the primary concerns that I've seen over the last couple months and several years, I think there's a messaging issue with Grand Traverse County. I think that this county has gotten a bad rap. I think that we're much better off than we think we are, and I think we just need to start saying it. I think that you folks have done an incredible job in the last couple of years of lowering the debt. That's a major issue. It is an issue, and you're addressing it. You've done a great job with it. I think you need to change the focus and use the momentum that you've created to your benefit. Take credit for what you've done. I think it's a critical need right now that this board stand up and say, we are addressing this problem and we're moving forward.
And if
That-
you were, go ahead.
That would be my first recommendation in response to your question. Absolutely.
And if you are a county administrator, how would you help us do that?
I think just a sit down with each one of you and facilitate the discussion to say, what do you think the strong points are? What are the weak points? And what message do you want your constituents in this community to hear and to get? And we can facilitate that very easily and create a message that will accurately reflect where we are right now. I really think we can do that together.
Okay. I'm going to go back to this one, but I'm going to change it a little. So we know your background. We have it in front of us, and obviously we know you. Why the change at this point in your career from law enforcement to county administration? Explain that, how you feel about that.
How do I feel about it?
And why? Why the change right now?
I want to make a difference at a higher level. Honestly, I have had a great career in law enforcement, and there really isn't much that I haven't done or accomplished in law enforcement. I'm proud of that fact. I'm proud of the job I've done. I'm proud of the way I've served my community and my sheriffs. To sit back and continue to know that I can maybe have an impact countywide, a bigger impact, and leave a better imprint on the county and that I have grown up in and served for 26 years, I don't think I should do that. I think that if I'm called to serve, I should step up and serve. And I do believe that this is a calling to me. January 24th, I stood in this room and told you folks that I did not want this job. Do you remember that?
I do.
Yep. How quickly that changes, right? I stood in the office the first few days and worked with Mr. Bott, Mr. Forsyth, and you, commissioners, and I realized that I can do this job. The skill sets that I have that make me successful as an undersheriff and a policeman, I believe will transition very well into this position, and I know that I can have an impact, and I want to do that.
Okay. What, trying to change these questions because they're, you know the current, you have had a chance to evaluate the current operations of the county and work within them. Do you have any ideas for innovative improvements? What would you, and we've asked you to just kind of keep us moving or just keep us here. If selected as the actual county administrator, how would you move us forward?
I think there needs to be a recognition that we need to continue to focus on improving technology. In your 2013-16 strategic plan, that was one of your 8 objectives, was to enhance technology and continue to move forward with technology. I think we're a little behind the curve on that, in that area. I would like to see an expansion with the use of technology. Specifically going paperless, I think will be a great advantage to the county. And the other piece right off the top of my head would be community development. I think we need to embrace community development to encourage people to come to Grand Traverse County with their businesses and with their residences and live here and work here. We need to work hard to get people to want to come to Grand Traverse County. And I think we can grow our way out of this problem that we're in right now. I really do.
Okay.
Follow up, please.
Do you have, go ahead.
When we talk about economic development, community development, I always come back to the same thing, and it actually is one of these questions in here regarding the county organization itself. The problem, it's easy to talk about economic development, it's easy to talk about creating jobs. Where do we find the workforce? You know, every business I know is looking for help. They simply cannot find enough employees to do the job. It's easy to talk about, you know, it's a great goal to create jobs, but we have to find the workforce. You know, every business in this community is looking for work. You know, the county itself struggles to fill positions. You know, we went for a year without an HR director. We went for almost a year without an IT director. We still struggle. We went for an extended time without a finance director. We need to figure out ways to do something differently. You know, I had a long discussion last night with Captain Ritter, who you're very familiar with, about the fact that we cannot find corrections officers in the jail. You know, one of the things that we continuously talk about is trying to improve the corrections staff, you know, but we simply cannot find the candidates. How can we find candidates? What ideas do you have to help us find candidates to fill positions?
The first response to your first question, I think we need to reestablish what type of business we're trying to entice to Grand Traverse County. We have a workforce issue. So I don't think we want to have, you know, large-scale manufacturing where there's going to be a requirement of hundreds and hundreds of employees. Maybe we have something a little different. Maybe we have an advanced technology manufacturing concept where you have 10 to 15, 20 startup positions that are making a significant wage to live here in Grand Traverse County or actually have a residence in Grand Traverse County. So maybe we need to redefine what type of business we're actually enticing to Grand Traverse County. As far as identifying workers, we have to get creative, right? We have a shortage of applicants. When I first started on with the Sheriff's Department, I think I was one of over 100 applicants that wanted a job here. Now we'll have 10 people show up for testing. Less than that will pass, the PT test, less than that will pass the written test, and you're forced to interview 3 or 4 candidates for a job as a law enforcement officer here. This is an issue. We have to get creative, and we have to attract candidates to Grand Traverse County that are not coming here. Specific to law enforcement, I think statewide there's a shortage in candidates for both corrections and law enforcement, so I don't want to focus only on that. But we have had some success here recently, specifically to corrections, by just cherry-picking employees, saying we want this type of employee, and then we go out and offer them the opportunity to come look at what we have to offer in terms of employment, and we've been successful with that.
Find the employee and buy it.
I'm sorry?
Find the employee and buy them.
Essentially, yes, only you can't offer them in a union environment, you can't offer them wages above and beyond their pay scale, but what you can do is you can attract them to the county by what the county offers. And what I think in terms of young people and younger families that want to come to Grand Traverse County, they're interested in our parks, they're interested in our trails, they're interested in our resources. We have to push that to them as a selling point.
Can I ask a question?
Absolutely.
Nick, tell us how you, tell us how you prepared to leap from undersheriff to county administrator and how your education helped you to make that leap.
Well, I didn't go to school to be an undersheriff. I went to Central Michigan University and studied public administration.
You have a bachelor's degree in that?
I have a bachelor's degree in public administration with majors in political science, economics, and sociology. During that time, I became a police reserve for the city of Traverse City and a Marine deputy for the county. So I finished my degree. I fully intended to be a city manager. That was my initial thought. As I got into law enforcement, I decided that was just a little more exciting at the time and a little more fitting of my passion. So I went to Macomb Community College and graduated the police academy, came back here, and was hired in 1995.
But let me clarify. To go from what you were doing, which was undersheriff, to what you're doing now, what did you do to prepare for that, I would say, leap? I mean, would you agree there's a significant difference between being the undersheriff and being the county administrator?
There's a lot more responsibility on the behalf of the county administrator. But what I have done as the undersheriff, in terms of my skill set, managing people, managing the budget, managing human resources issues, labor relations and employee relations issues, working through significant instances, crime scenes. I think all of those skills that I have developed over the last 16 years as an undersheriff has prepared me to step into the role of the county administrator. Yes, it is a big leap in responsibilities and a change of responsibilities, but I do believe that my skill set allows me to do that.
Dan.
Thanks. First of all, thank you so much for being interim administrator. I think you're doing a great job.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for it. You know, you do have, I think, a reputation of being a really nice guy. And I think, though, there's times when the administrator needs to be tough with the board. You know, they stand up for things that you believe in. I'm not saying disobey the board, but you can strongly advise the board. Also, I'll bet you're very close to all the employees. So how comfortable are you going to be when it comes to, I'm going to do what the board says and maybe not satisfy what the majority of employees want? How, will that be a difficulty for you to do that?
No. As long as I'm afforded the process of you letting me be heard, I am very comfortable. As long as we have had a frank, honest communication between you and me. I understand your direction. I understand where you want to go and that you've allowed me to have input. I'm okay with what you want me to do, and I can implement that. I have hired officers and then later fired the same officer. So many times against the wishes of the group, because it's the right thing to do. And one of the things that I have the ability to do through this process is identify the right thing to do. And it's very important that as government we do the right thing all the time. So if you provide me direction and I don't understand that direction or I have questions about that direction, I will ask you. I will ask for you to let me tell you my opinion. I will hear your opinion. And in the end run, your rule goes. And I can implement that decision very easily.
Thank you.
Tom?
One of my things that I like is that jobs get posted and advertised so that everybody has an idea, of a job opening. Since we're a public, this is government, it's not a private business. So at least once in the recent history, a deputy administrator was hired, and I don't believe there was ever a job posting. And then that deputy administrator left. So then we discussed, the shortage of not only an administrator, but a deputy administrator at the same time. And we decided not to make any changes, but, it was discussed publicly. That's sort of an unusual situation, not having either the deputy or the administrator, employed at one time. So I'm just wondering what you think about the posting of jobs and, being open about that. And also, whether you think the administrator should just hire the deputy administrator because it's something that they have a right to do, or whether they should post it publicly, or whether we even need a deputy administrator for that matter. Because we've had them and not had them. It's not been consistent. Some administrators have required that, and others have not asked for that. So.
You absolutely should post a job because you never know who's out there. Okay? I was telling a story earlier. We posted the job for a deputy law enforcement officer years ago, and an applicant from Florida who happened to be a minister applied. And I remember sitting and reviewing the applications thinking, there's no way I'm going to hire a minister from Florida to come be a cop in Grand Traverse County. It wasn't going to happen. And this gentleman came from Florida on his dime, mind you, and we did not let him leave the department before we were asking him if he would work for Grand Traverse County. We had no idea that guy was out there, and the only way we knew he was out there is because we posted it and it was public. He wanted to come to Grand Traverse County. He took a significant risk to come here, and we wanted to hire him. That didn't work out, but we didn't know he was out there, and I'm sorry that he did not get the job. So I think it's absolutely critical to post these positions, all of these positions, so that you can get a candidate pool. You need to have that so you can have an understanding who's out there and give the job to the best person qualified. That's the first question. The second question, I was here with that discussion when that discussion took place. The sheriff and I have had many point-blank conversations that you would not like to hear. That probably nobody would like to hear. There needs to be an absolute trust and confidence between the sheriff and I that when we sit in a room and discuss something that's critical or very important to the agency or the county, that he and I can have candid communication. And that candid communication is not going to go to the captains and it's not going to go to the deputies because we talk about things that most people don't want to hear. And if they do hear it, they're probably not going to understand either the context or the intent. So you need to trust that person implicitly. That's what I feel about the deputy administrator position. That position needs to be chosen by the county administrator, with then the recommendation coming to you and letting you see that position, and either giving the A-OK or let's try again. But the deputy administrator needs to be hired by the county administrator, because those two are going to work closely together, and they have to have that trust.
But post the job.
I think you post a job to see who's out there. Absolutely.
Did you have a follow-up, Dan?
I hope I'm not taking too many turns, is that okay?
No, you're okay.
Okay.
I'm watching the time and stuff.
At what point do you think it's appropriate to withhold information from this board?
If the information is less than factual, if it's unknown, if it's true, if it comes from an outside source that's anonymous, I don't know that I would always give you that information unless it was so inflammatory that you needed to see it or hear it. If there's just rumors and innuendos out there about something or someone, I think that it would cause you to chase your tail with that kind of information. But good factual information that matters and is going to have an impact on what the county does, or it's going to have an impact on the county in terms of liability, that needs to be shared immediately.
Okay, thank you.
You want to go through the other questions first? Or
I have one, and
Go
then
ahead.
let's see how things move along. Up until this point, you've worked in a very defined hierarchy in the sheriff's department. This isn't so well defined. We have a lot of different departments, and you answer to 7 of us.
Yes.
As one. You know that there are times when we are 4 to 3.
Yes.
How would you deal with that? So you've got direction from a board that was 4 of us said do it this way, or do this initiative, and 3 don't like it. How would you deal with that? What would you do?
Again, frank, open, and honest communication with each commissioner. And I think it's important that the administrator not get involved in picking sides, because that's not the administrator's job. The administrator's job is to implement your direction and your policy. So those that are against or on the 3 side versus the 4, I think there needs to be a lot of communication with those 3 to understand their dissent and try to mediate that prior to that decision, if at all possible, so that it's not such a sore topic at the board meeting, I guess. I think it's important to get ahead of it, if at all possible. And if not possible, then you work with those commissioners that are on the dissent to try to make them understand what's occurring and keep them up to speed as to how the policy implementation is going.
Okay. Let's go with Sunny and then Cheryl.
Nate, as you, I'm sure, are aware, I'm sitting here interviewing my 6th county administrator in the time I've sat in this chair. I'm not sure that that's something I want to brag about. My goal coming out of this process is to bring stability to Grand Traverse County, and I'm hoping longevity in a county administrator that's going to be here 10 years. Can you tell me, or more, can you tell me that you are that guy?
Yes. And I can tell you why, if you'd like.
Absolutely.
I'm 47. I have a wife and 2 kids. My son is 20, my daughter is 17, and I have to work for quite a while. I grew up on a farm in Blair Township, and I went to school here. I've worked here for 26 years, and I have an opportunity now, thanks to this board, to see the inner workings of the administration in the county, and I'm loving it. I absolutely love this job. It's excited me, and I can see myself working here long term. I was hoping you would say this, because I want to be here for a long time. I wasn't born here. I moved with my parents early 1970, but I do plan on dying here, and not soon, hopefully. Jiminy Christmas. I'd like to drag that out a little bit.
Dean's going to fall out of his chair.
Yeah, I want to work here, and I want to work here for a long time, and I hope that's what this board wants. One of my questions for you was, where do you see Grand Traverse County in 10 years? And I'll save that for later, but the reason I say that is I'm going to be here. I have to work, and I'm not leaving. I don't come here to visit the sand dunes. I don't come here to go to the Cherry Festival. I don't come here to visit all the great things that Grand Traverse County and the region offer. I live and work and breathe here. That is my intention. Absolutely.
Cheryl?
Nate, since March, when you stepped into this role, you've had the opportunity to sort of work with a triumvirate of leadership. It's been you and Chris and Dean Bott. So it's sort of been a brain trust of three people. At least you've, I think, held yourselves out as being sort of a group of three that have been doing this job. So as exciting and interesting as it has been 1/3 of the job as opposed to the job.
Yes.
Do you think that if you were given this opportunity that you would continue that relationship with Dean, that, I don't want to say reliance, but that, would you continue in that role?
Absolutely. I think each one of you know that we kiddingly call ourselves Team Awesome.
No, I didn't know that.
You didn't know that?
I can't figure out which one's Mr. T, who's Mr. Awesome, but it's okay.
We do because it's a joke, because we were like the 21st pick to do the interim administrator job. I don't understand finance, nor will I ever understand finance as much as Mr. Bott. Since I've been the undersheriff, that Mr. Bott has taught me so much about budgeting and about finance. I have a long way to go. But day to day, we have conversations with Dean and Chris about how is this working? How do the bonds work? What's the debt capacity of the county? Where are we? How does this work? And between Dean and Heidi, I'm drinking from a fire hose, learning the things that I don't know. And I'm very grateful to have had the opportunity to work with Dean over the last couple months, and I look forward to working with him in the future. He's a great man and knows finance inside and out. I understand budgeting, I understand revenue, I understand expenses, everything else I'm learning, but Dean knows it. And I look forward to continuing that relationship.
Yeah, I just have a follow-up question or statement. I guess the concern would be that, as we can attest to from our conversation about hiring a deputy administrator, we only hire and fire and evaluate the CEO.
Yes.
So that would be the relationship that we would have oversight over. So we wouldn't have any oversight over Dean or a deputy. So if the relationship were to continue to be too enmeshed, it would be, from my perspective, I mean, obviously you're going to rely on every one of your department heads, presumably, right? But you see what I'm saying?
Yes.
I mean, at some point you have to cut the cord, right? Because you're going to be the CEO.
Yes. I will seek input from every department head as the topic requires. But when it comes time to make a decision and take action, that's on me. And I'm okay with that. I will rely on the information, digest it, learn as much as I can about the information being presented to me, and make a common sense decision in many instances, backed up by facts, and make a decision. I don't have any problem with that whatsoever.
Bob?
Given what you know so far, what do you think will be, and I know you mentioned finance, but what do you think will be your biggest challenge filling that role, and what are you going to do to help overcome that challenge?
We are doing it right now in brownfield, community development. That's something I've never done. I've never been exposed to it, so it's a difficult concept for me to grasp. I've worked with Jean before she left, and I'm working with Dean and Chris now to try to understand how brownfield works, EDC works, community development. I've met with the EDC a couple times, just learning what they do, trying to understand their goals and objectives. But that is a weakness of mine. So I'm currently on a learning curve there, and I certainly anticipate continuing working with the people in brownfield, the consultants, the brownfield board, the EDC, to try to understand what they need and how I can be helpful to them.
Ron?
Thanks for coming in, Nate. How do you see yourself being able to distance yourself from the sheriff's department? Mainly, I guess, when it comes to budgeting. I mean, you've put the sheriff's budget together. How are you going to deal with that, I guess?
Specific to the budget, the sheriff's department's budget is 87% personnel costs. Everything else is commodities and expenses that are rather routine. So when you talk about the sheriff's budget, what you're talking about is personnel. And I know it very well. We don't always agree at the sheriff's department about how things are run. And some of those employees don't like me, Ron, just so you know. But I can do that. I can separate myself because I know at the end of the day, the right thing has to be done. The sheriff's department knows that as well. So if they're trying to pull a fast one over on me with the budget, it's not going to fly. They wouldn't do that to begin with, but I know that budget inside and out. There are efficiencies that can be recognized, and there's also some needs at the sheriff's department. But at the end of the day, the right thing has to be done. And what you're going to get from me specific to the sheriff's department in terms of the employees and the budget is you're going to have an open, honest communication from me about what I think about the budget or personnel action or a need. And that's how I function. I will do the right thing regardless of pressure.
Thank you.
What is your, well, let's just go with the prepared question. What do you see as the county administrator's role in communicating with the press and the public? What kind of relationship do you see that yourself as a county administrator having with the media and the public?
So the press, I don't have a problem talking to the press. I enjoy talking to the press. I have good relationships with most media outlets. They have a job to do, and they're going to do it with your help or not. It's so important. The freedom of the press is so important in this country that it was the First Amendment. Okay? The first one they came up with, they said, hey, we need to have this out there. For transparency, we need people to be accountable for what they say and what they do in government, and it's that important. How I speak to you behind closed doors, when you're speaking in a less than factual, maybe a discussion that's subject to a final determination, you don't talk to the press that way. You have to be open and honest with the press, but you can't tell them everything. If it's not open, or if it's not factual, if it's something that could change, if it's something that is a piece of strategy on behalf of the board in terms of a project or negotiations, you can't tell them everything, but it's okay to tell them why you're not telling them something. Explain it to them. I'm going to tell you this, I'm not going to tell you this, and this is why. In my experience, has overwhelmingly been positive with the press. They understand that. They just have a job to do, and they want to do their job well. You offer them the opportunity to speak with you very openly and candidly. For me, I've been very successful with off-the-record conversations, and I think there's value to that. But when it comes down to it, giving information to people, you have to know what you're saying, and you have to know what the impact of your words are before you say it to the community or to the press.
Thank you. Any other sort of, go, Sunny.
A longtime employee of Grand Traverse County. Thank you for your service.
Thank you.
How do we separate that coworker mentality from administrator mentality? I in my own mind, I've known you long enough to know that I believe we can make that happen.
Yeah.
But that question is out there. Someone told me the other day that, well, if you make Nate the county administrator, the sheriff's budget's going to go from 38% of the budget to 52%. Well, I'm pretty sure that's not going to happen because we're not going to allow that to happen, and you're not going to allow that to happen. But yet we still know that we all have interpersonal relations with our coworkers. And do you see that there is the potential to have a conflict in any of that?
I understand where people are coming from with that concern. One thing that law enforcement officers are very well aware of constantly is a conflict of interest. We're always aware of it. We work with it every day. This is not an issue for me. I've been the undersheriff for 16 years. I've made many unpopular decisions that are adverse to my employees. We still maintain a relationship based on trust, based on honesty, based on understanding what each other's position is. I have a lot of friends, by the way, outside of the department. I have relationships with many departments in this county, and I cherish those relationships. Being the county administrator, again, is about doing the right thing. It is not about friendships. And if people who know me, they know that is the truth. They know that's how it works. And I don't have any concern about that. I have the concern about the appearance. I do know that people have that concern. I'm sensitive to it. And because I'm sensitive to it, I will react when that situation presents itself. So that appearance is diminished if at all possible. But the way I function, the way I work, that is not an issue for me.
Yes, ma'am.
Nate, you've worked for an elected official for many years.
Yes.
And I would say that that's probably been in a command-down position. I mean, obviously, it's kind of a paramilitary type. The top issues the commands, and the people below follow the commands. And you also haven't ever worked with a board before, as far as I can tell from your resume. So do you see any potential conflict there from your training and your experience in being up at the top of the command chain and then having to work with a group of people who probably are not going to want to be commanded?
That would be the seven of us.
That would be
That's us.
correct. And instead would probably be, giving you directives.
Yeah. Well, I do a lot of things I don't want to do when I'm told to do them. That's a joke.
And then you go to work.
And then I go to work, yeah. Hey, doing things that you're told to do is this is part of the deal. It's what this job entails. And as the undersheriff, both Sheriff Fewens and Sheriff Bensley have given me a lot of latitude, probably much more than they have, or they needed to, in terms of being involved in their decision-making process. My only hope, and when they told me to do something, I did it. Because once that discussion is done, it's done. You've got to move forward. It does no good to sit and talk about it any further. The decision's been made, just do it. And then you work through the decision implementation phase. That's the harder piece of it. Working with you is not going to be much different than that. I would hope and I would request that if I am the administrator, that you allow me to have that frank conversation with you individually and as a board. But once you tell me to do something, it's done. And it is somewhat of a paramilitary organization. You tell me what to do and I do it. Right? Mm-hmm. I would like to have the conversation, though, because I think that's where the value comes. The value in the implementation process comes from that discourse. It comes from the to and fro, where I can say to an employee, not the commissioners set to do this, we decided this is the way we're going. And when they say, well, were you part of that decision process? I can honestly say, yes, I was. That's the value of implementation. So if the employees don't like it, I can at least say I'm part of this discussion. I'm part of the decision.
We make many decisions. We talked about, oh, I'm sorry. We
Go
make
ahead.
many decisions that are 4-3 votes, 5-2 votes. You know, but the decision has been made, and the thing that always, frustrates me probably more than many others is that once the board makes that decision, we have to, as an organization, have to support those decisions.
Yes.
And unfortunately, sometimes that doesn't always happen.
Yes.
And I think it's absolutely critical that frank communication happens, but once the decision is made, we implement the decision.
That's correct. And it's poisonous for an employee in a subordinate role to say, well, the sheriff said this. That's not how that works. We said this. We have made the decision. We are moving forward. You don't have to say that Commissioner Follett said this or Commissioner Crawford said this. We are moving forward.
Tom?
Okay. Village of Kingsley, you sit on the board, so it gives you another perspective besides law enforcement. And down in Kingsley, was that where a Canadian company or another company from outside the area came in, they wanted to have some sort of a medical marijuana factory or plant there?
Well, Theracan had made a couple of presentations to the DDA and to the village about the concept of bringing in a medical marijuana
Do you think
facility.
this is a good idea? I mean, I'm open to it as a commissioner, that be another aspect of Grand Traverse County, that we encourage that for economic development, or even, just lower the penalties on marijuana in the future,
I think that's an unfair question to
It
ask.
is because we don't have that ability.
It's a political question
We
that
don't, the
county
townships
has
have
nothing to do with.
The townships have to decide that, that's state law, so.
We'll let you off
I
the
didn't
hook
think
on
it
that
started
one,
as an
Nate.
unfair question, because in the village of Kingsley, a company came in to set up shop.
Well, in the
So you
village
could
of-
ask him his perspective on that.
Okay.
But specifically, the law is a state law that the townships get to decide. We don't have anything to do with that.
I could rephrase.
Okay.
What are some of the good things that you've learned while you've been down in the village of Kingsley? Because you're sitting on a board like this, except it's for the village of Kingsley. Because it's another type of learning experience to how these organizations function. So.
It certainly is. And we, one thing that I've learned to appreciate about the village board is 7 people come together with usually vastly different experiences to solve very complex problems. And when it comes down to a time to vote, each board member has to vote according to the dictates of their own conscience. And that's a great thing. It's a great thing to be part of, and I think it's a great job as a board member to perform for the community. Some of those votes aren't popular, but I've really enjoyed that. I've been there for 14 years. I've enjoyed it immensely, and I've learned a lot. Everything from medical marijuana plants to salt trucks, right? And it's been great. That board, our board, is a little more 7-0-ish than you guys, but we've had our wars. The medical marijuana discussion, that was a war. That whole topic split that board and split the community. But what's great is that decision was made to allow the ordinance, and that community came back together. In large part because of the dignity that the board members had, or the respect for the board members that we had for each other. We knew that they were talking about the dictates of their own conscience. There was no malice there. It was a good discussion. It was a great community discussion, and the end result is the end result. but the process was good.
Bob?
Yeah, just to, I mean, since I represent that village, and I went to several of those, I can tell you that those were animated discussions, but that board, and Nate too was part of that, they didn't let pressure from either side sway them. They did their research, they actually visited another facility out of the state, so they did their due diligence. And I was really impressed, because if you think of the village of Kingsley, it's a small place, but I was really impressed with what they did to make that decision. It wasn't a fly-by-night, and it took a long time to get to that decision, but they really worked hard at it, and Nate was a big part of that too.
Anybody else have any other questions? No? Sunny?
Okay, Nate, the question I will ask all of the candidates, if you were offered this position, what kind of time frame before you would be available to fill that position? You know, I know you have a commitment at your current position.
I do.
Which I know you take seriously, so that's
Certainly.
why I asked the question.
Statutorily, the sheriff has to have an undersheriff. I'm not sure how that works in terms of when an undersheriff vacates a position, if the law actually dictates how soon that has to be filled. But I would certainly think that 30 days transition. I've been there for 16 years in that office, and I have a lot of loose ends that I need to tie up. What we should talk, if that was offered, how the interim capacity continued or didn't continue. I don't know how that would function, but I would assume that we could make that work in terms of a transition. But I would think 30 days at least, in terms of a transition out of that office, would be more than enough time.
Do you have any questions for us?
How much time do I have?
You have some time. Let's go with about 5 minutes.
5 minutes.
5 minutes.
So I was serious when I asked Sonny the question, and the reason was because when I scoped this out, I put a lot of thought into this, and I've been thinking about it for longer than this cycle. Where do you see Grand Traverse County in 10 years?
Anybody? Bueller? Bueller?
Well, I see it as fiscally compliant county, if you will, and the finances are in good order. I think we have set the stage for the unfunded pension. That's the big elephant in the room. But I think the stage has been set to help address that. I think economically, we do need economic development here. We need to probably partner with the city and get high-speed internet. Get that infrastructure in here that's holding back some of the companies that might come do business here. So I think a lot of the partnerships, and then I think the expansion, for me, the expansion of all the outdoor activities that we have and enhancements of those. And the other thing I'll add is I'll be watching it part-time from Florida too, so in 10
So
years.
you're leaving anyway. Who else?
Well, I guess I don't see any slowdown or stoppage of the growth. I think it's going to continue to come. You know, it's a matter of how we manage that growth, or at least manage the bad effects of that growth. You know, some of the growth that we get is great, but some of it's not so good. You know, so we have to be very proactive in how we manage that growth. You know, we're going to see construction continue to grow. You know, when we had the big housing crash in 2007, 2008, 2009, we were still at 4.5–5% growth, which was the national average in the good times. You know, but we went from 17–18% down to 5%, and we were just in a panic. You know, but we were still there. That growth is continuing. There is new construction, there is growth in this community every place you look. How we can be proactive to manage that growth, and not only manage the growth, but be prepared to serve that growth. I think that's the big piece. The people that are coming here expect a lot of the services that they were accustomed to. in many cases, and they expect services that they want, you know, and their wants and needs today are not the wants and the needs of the people that were here 20 years ago.
Correct.
The whole society thing has changed significantly of what people expect, and how are we going to meet that need? I think that is our biggest challenge, is to meet the expectations of the growing community that we have and what they see as their needs.
Go ahead.
I think we're going to be expected to provide even greater services to our aging community because we are a destination location for retirees. And I think the expectation is that government is going to step up and provide more and more services for the elderly. I think we're well positioned right now with our COA and some of the things that we're doing, but I think that that's going to be a growth industry for us. On the other end, I think that younger people and business people are going to expect that high tech and not just, you know, I think they're going to expect it across the board. I think how we do business today is going to look completely different in 10 years. It's going to have to. We're not going to just be sitting in a box doing what we're doing now. It's going to have to all be different. It's going to have to be faster, more efficient, more cost effective. I think people are going to have to learn new jobs. I mean, I think that the pace, remember that, I'm thinking about that, I can't remember the name of the book, but it talked about the pace of technology and how it doubled, like back in the day, it doubled like every 10 years or whatever. I mean, it's like doubling every minute and a half now. I mean, it's just exponential. And I think as government, one of the things that we do is we get bogged down because we're government. We're just not used to moving and being nimble, and I think we're going to have to learn to be nimble.
I think you're right.
Well, that's a good point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that I like what you said about growing our way out. We can't cut our way out of the debts that we have. I think that's been tried. It's not, and it's not that it's not popular. That's fine. We do a lot of things that aren't popular, but as you said, but are correct. I don't think cutting our way out of the debt situation is the correct way to go. I do think that growing our way out of it, being leaner and meaner and more efficient, there's a lot of room for that. But just simply slashing is not the way to go. So I would like for the next, in 10 years, to be sort of, I'm very involved in MAC, and Michigan Association of Counties and things, and I would like to be one of those counties that they use it as an example. That look what this county did. They expanded, they grew their way out of it. They didn't slash and burn. They didn't go down in flames at all. But rather they were smart about it. They were smart about it. They got themselves out. They kept their obligations to the pension, to the other post-employment benefits, and did it the right way. Tom?
Well, one of the things that's on the horizon is the 2020 census. There'll be another population count of this area, and Networks Northwest and other organizations I'm part of, we're studying that to be prepared for that when it happens, rather than just learn that it happens and then do something, because it takes years to actually plan for that, called a Metropolitan Planning Organization. And it'll affect a lot of things. Transportation around the county, it'll affect our bus services, it'll affect our, how we route traffic around the area, and that's going to affect development, and it's all very related. So some of these things are our purview and other things aren't, obviously. But I think once we move into that size of a community where we qualify for that, there'll be a lot of additional federal dollars coming through the state into our area, and that will help. It'll help with our road problem, the condition of the roads, even though that's some time off. But I see that as sort of a benchmark in the future, that we become a metropolitan planning organization area. This area would be part of it, what we said in here. And also that there is definitely a movement in the area through TC New Tech and a couple other organizations that I attend, that it's becoming attractive for people to come here with tech companies, not just computer tech, IT tech, but medical tech and maybe agricultural tech, so not just a narrow area, and that once we get the highest speed of internet and a few other things, that we will be attractive for that, and that will take years to build. So within that 10-year span, I think you'd see a lot of growth in that sector. So infrastructure and technology.
I agree.
I think MPO funding will come. I thought we'd make it in 2010, and then they changed the benchmark, so we didn't qualify. But we still have a portion of our community and our society that, for lack of a better term, still have their head in the sand, that thinks they still want this to remain a small community. I think the comments that we made earlier, that growth is not going to stop. The idea that people think we're still going to stay the little downtown community that they're familiar with, or they were familiar with their kids and now they retired back here. We're not there anymore, and we're never going to go back to that. So as a community, one of the things that we have to recognize is that we can't go back to that. We need to talk about crosstown east-west corridors. We need to talk about how to move people from point A to point B. The philosophy that's out there is that if we don't expand 8th Street, more people are going to walk and ride their bicycle. It's just a line of bull, and it's never going to get there. It's just, we simply, we have to get past that. And right, wrong, or indifferent, there's a big piece of our community that's still out there saying we don't need more roads. We just need to, maybe improve the ones that we have, but we shouldn't have more roads. The only way you move more cars down the road is with more lanes to put the traffic in. I don't know how else to describe it.
Dan?
Yeah, I kind of like to see us, the county and the county workforce, and if you get the job, your job, to be managed more like the way Beta manages their organization. They're performance-based, and every department has benchmarks so they can measure and manage what they're doing. And I know that all the workers here feel like they do a good job. I bet they do. But I'd like to be able to prove it. And so how do you know that you're efficient and effective unless you have some way that you implement these measurements? I don't think we have that in this county. We may keep track of this or that, but we're not using the new management concepts that we could, and I think Beta's a good example. I'd like to see us lean more into that.
Okay. Did you have anything? You're good?
Yep.
Okay.
Well, I'm sensitive to your time.
Yeah.
I know that clock's behind me, but
In
we
3
don't get a
minutes,
lot.
you hit 1 hour.
We don't get a lot of you and me time, so I appreciate this. Not just tonight, but I appreciate the relationship I've had with you for years. I appreciate your allowing me to be part of the interim management team. Chris and Dean have been phenomenal to work with. The opportunity that was given to me that night was outstanding, and I'm taking advantage of it. I've learned a lot, and I appreciate your trust in me and the other 2 county administrators, interim. But I look forward to working with you in the future, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Nate. Okay. Take a short break? Yep. 7:30.
Is this mine, James, or do I have to leave that?
It's all yours.
It's yours now.
They kept so many documents, I just
Are we all, oh, yeah, all here. Okay, we're all still chewing, but
That's all right, we're not going to stop
I'm the
chewing.
only one that has to talk at first.
Where's Belleville, Wisconsin?
Where is it? It is about 30 minutes south of downtown Madison. We're about 10 minutes out of the Beltway.
Down towards Janesville and Evansville?
Well, I actually drive through Janesville each day to go to work, but it's about 30 minutes west-northwest of Janesville. And well, actually, Evansville is kind of another turn. So you're familiar with the area a little bit.
Well, my daughter is the herd administrator for the University of Wisconsin. She handles the nutrition and health of their entire dairy herd in their 3 facilities. And her office is in Madison.
Okay.
But she spends most of her time up in Arlington. But they bought a house in Evansville.
Okay, well, Evansville, if you go north of Evansville toward Madison, you run into a town called Brooklyn. If you cut through Brooklyn about 20 minutes, you get to Belleville.
Do they have the?
Have you ever been to New Glarus or heard of that?
Not too much.
They've got they've got kind of a Swiss theme going on there, another small community, a lot of cows, a lot of cheese. But
There's a lot of cows everywhere.
All right, Sonny, cut it off.
We have to start the official interview now?
Yeah, let's do the interview.
Okay.
But if you count the little boxes, there's only 24.
I just thought
James?
I'd ask.
Yes.
While we're all up here chewing, do you have any,
Please proceed
Are you
with
good?
introducing yourselves and
Okay.
for our next candidate.
okay. So we have Mr. Brian Wilson.
Hello.
Welcome. We'll go through and introduce ourselves like we did the first time here.
I'm Sonny Wheelock. I've been a Grand Traverse County Commissioner here for 18 years. My family's lived in this community for well over 175 years. So we kind of got deep, big roots in the community. And very excited to, hear what we have to say tonight.
Great.
Bob Johnson, I moved here 16 years ago and I retired from the Coast Guard.
Okay.
Because I love my wife dearly, I moved from Miami to here, so. Currently work for one of the public utilities here, so.
Great.
Hi, I'm Cheryl Follett. My family is a farming family, that we've been here since the mid to late 1800s. I'm an attorney, and I've been on the board for a year and a half.
Okay.
I'm Carol Crawford. I have been on the board, this is my 4th year. It's my 2nd year as chair. I guess I'm a relative newbie. I've been here, 15 years. We moved here to raise my kids here. I have a 15-year-old and an 11-year-old. And so I'm a full-time mom and a part-time accountant.
Okay.
I'm Ron Klaus. Been on the board, this is my 4th year. Lived here all my life. And am a general contractor that have been building homes for 40 years.
Okay.
I'm Dan Lathrop. I've lived here more than 40 years. I'm the oldest person on this board, and I've been a Board Commissioners member for 6 years. I make my living as a physician and surgeon.
Okay.
My name is Tom Mayer. I've lived here since 1987 when my wife and I moved here. And I have a background in business administration and arts management. And I've been on the board, same as Cheryl. We are approaching our year and a half, our first term.
Okay, so we'll get started. We have all your background stuff in front of us, but if you could briefly give us your career path and describe for us, based on your understanding about our county, so I'm sure you've done some research so far, how are you a good fit for the county, and how is the county a good fit for you?
Well, let's see. I guess I could start off by saying if I was to go back about 25 years or so, or a little longer back to college, I'd probably say I never thought I would be going into city government, really. It was, I was always kind of thinking, well, I'm going to go for, the military option. I had an ROTC scholarship. I thought I want to try to go active duty and do these different things and make a career out of the military. Well, it didn't go that way. It's always the needs of the Army, and Uncle Sam put me in the Army Reserve. And went ahead and started graduate school, and at the time I was thinking, okay, I'm going to use this to leverage my way up maybe into a position with federal law enforcement or federal corrections or something, because my bachelor's degree was in law enforcement. My first position, though, and I was looking for some jobs as I was trying to finish up my master's, the first one that someone called me, a person from like the state employment office, and said, hey, there's a job that might fit you that's in the city of St. Louis. You should look at it. It's a liquor control officer. And I'm like, okay, that's interesting. So I applied for it.
Not a taste tester.
Well, it was funny. It's, well, I have a lot of stories about that. But I went to the city of St. Louis and got hired in their excise division as a liquor control officer, and have been now, well, as of this week, 22 years working in local government. And I haven't looked back since, so it's been great. I would say that what I really enjoyed about St. Louis was the fact that it gave me a wide dunking in so far as the complexities of a large bureaucratic operation. St. Louis is a little into, and I told this to James when we did our Skype interview, that well, a lot of people don't know is St. Louis is one of I thought it was a few cities, but I did some research. There's actually 38 or 40 cities in the nation that are considered independent. They're not part of a county. So in the city of St. Louis, they had county offices by statute within City Hall. So we had a elected treasurer, recorder, recorder of deeds. There was the entire, including a city sheriff and circuit attorney, and those were all in city government. Those positions and positions under those departments were all patronage type or appointed positions by the elected official, while the rest of city government, which I was in, was civil service. So it was kind of interesting to learn about how that whole dynamic of things works. There wasn't a lot of opportunities, though, for me, I saw after I finished my master's, to really use my master's where I was or to get into a management position, unless I wanted to wait until I was about ready to retire, the way things were going. So I started looking out, and the first position I got into was City of Caruthersville, which was back in a rural county that I'd grown up in my younger years. It was funny, as in high school, they were always our cross-county rivals, and we used to always say, we're going to demolish Caruthersville, but I actually took a job there where my job was to demolish houses damaged by the tornado for about 18 months. And once that grant finished, I took that experience plus what I had from St. Louis and started looking at city administrator positions, and found my way up in North Missouri. And as I started looking for opportunities, once my kids were getting out of high school, my two oldest were getting out of high school, I said, okay, it's 4 years here, it's about time, let's go, let's look somewhere else. My wife said, wherever you want to go. And I had some good feedback about Wisconsin, so we made the move north. My parents don't like that, but I'm north, so we like it. I will say that I like being north because summers are a lot milder. And now that our youngest one is in college and the other ones are kind of not really set anywhere either, we're like, well, it's time now. I'm halfway through my career. It's time to find a place where I feel like I can retire from. And so I've been looking for larger organizations again to get back into that now that I've got the management experience. And when I read about Grand Traverse County, I found it very interesting. You asked me, what do I think I can bring to the position based on what I've read and what I've seen? I know you're looking for someone who can collaborate, who can build relationships, who can build trust in government. That is something that I feel I am good at doing. I'm very good at working with people, trying to find common ground and find solutions to problems that may be bothering or otherwise upsetting the status quo. When I got hired in town of Beloit, they'd had like 4 years of upheaval. They'd had a lot of lawsuits from employees. They'd had some controversy over a previous police chief, and the previous administrator, had been removed after a lot of political turmoil and such. So they wanted someone who could come in, restore trust, and build up a relationship with business. I did that, and after a few years, boards change, and so there was a new priority they decided on, and they wanted to go with someone else. So I stepped down, and now I'm in Belleville. What I like about Belleville, it kind of takes me back to some of my roots in my first community that I was administrator for, in that I work as a lot of economic development and growth. It's a rapidly growing small community. And going back to kind of what I was saying earlier, I've really got a commitment to service. I enjoy seeing what I can do to help a community or an organization to grow and thrive and develop. I understand that change has to happen incrementally. There has to be a transition. If you try to just throw change in unilaterally, there's opposition to it, there's pushback, and sometimes you have to win people over with showing them what the possibilities are. And that's one thing I've kind of excelled at. I did it with downtown planning in one of my other communities, and also where I am now, being able to see a bigger picture and say, this is what's possible, and this is what I see is going to happen maybe in the next 5 to 10 years. And sometimes you'll get some laughs, and they'll say, no, that's not going to happen, that's not going to happen. But then you can start showing them statistics and say, well, let's see, the last 2 years we've had, and this is in Belleville right now, we've had 14 million in new construction in the last 2 years. And we've had we've had as many in the last year housing permits, new house permits, as we had in the previous 8 years. So we're out of the recession, we're growing again. And the last time we had a growth spurt like that, we saw a 25% increase in population. So I say 25% increase in population within the next decade, easily. And that's really getting a lot of people excited. And now we're taking on an aggressive plan to update our facilities, build a new library, build a new police station. That was kind of forced on us because of a mold issue in the other building. But figuring out how to make it work, how it's going to fit with our taxes, how it's going to fit with our debt limits, that's been something that I've been working creatively with all the resources at my disposal to come up with solutions for. And that's what I would bring here too. You'll find that I'm very into problem solving and being creative, and I'd like to show you what I can do.
Okay. So it sounds like you have done some research on us and our county. Based on your research and understanding of Grand Traverse County, what do you see as the most important opportunities and challenges for us right now? And how would you approach those?
Well, I can take what I've read in the paper, but I know there's got to be more to it behind the scenes. And I would definitely want to dig in further before I start giving a grand plan.
On the surface.
But on the surface, it seems like you've taken steps to address the issues with the unfunded pension liabilities. But it still looks like you've got other things with facilities that need to be updated. I noticed that there was in at least the 2016 audit report, there was a mention about $500,000 that needs to be updated in the Civic Center. I don't know if that's already been planned or anything's done with that. You need IT security updates. And a lot of times, county governments, I think, sometimes are taken lightly for what they do, because a lot of people feel like, well, I get most of my services from the city. I get most of mine from the township. But I think a lot of times the county has to be the leader. You are the overall umbrella organization here. And in this case, Grand Traverse has a lot of leadership in that it's with the way you kind of have a sewer commission, I think, what I was reading with the different communities and such. I forgot what the exact board name was. But I think that kind of leadership, especially from a planning and organization and pulling together different partners, can be really valuable. Sometimes it's harder to get two cities to sit down and deal with each other. But when the county comes in and says, we're going to do this because it's what's best for the region, that's the leadership they need. I think you've done a lot of that. I would like to explore what else there might be possibility-wise. I would like to look and see what else we can do to address some of the funding shortfalls within both statutory limits and your own local limits. And I would be really open to having feedback from the commission, from the employees that have been here, from the other elected officials in the county, the department heads, just to really try to get together a nice picture and figure out a strategy for moving forward. I think that this is what happens sometimes when I try to get on a tangent without a lot of, notes in front of me. If I come to a board meeting, I've always got notes.
It's okay.
But,
Take your time.
But I'll tell you, I think there's a lot of opportunities here for the county to reassert itself as a leader, and not saying be the boss, but at least be setting an example and leading. And I think as I dig into things and I look at maybe some efficiencies, I know that the last administrator was looking at maybe some reorganization of some of the departments and efficiencies. I like to look at that stuff too. I know there was an interest in possibly looking at benchmarking probably our county performance against other counties in the area. I'm familiar with doing that too. I think that's a very valuable exercise. I did that in one of my previous communities where I was able to project and show this is what our cost per, when we'd get complaints that, oh, our taxes are too high. Well, I could show them our tax rate was the lowest in the county for a community of our size, but I could also show them that we were providing, police service at a fraction per capita of these other larger communities and communities our size. The same with fire service and other things. I was able to show we had a lot of efficiency there. And I like it. Like I said, I like problem solving. I'm an analyst person. I like a lot of data. And I try to make things as simple and as easy to understand as possible so far as laying it out logically and presenting it in such a way. So I would look forward to those challenges.
Okay. We'll switch gears. What do you see as the county administrator's role in communicating with the press and the public? How would you plan to be successful in communicating our message to the media and to the public and to the employees?
Well, I think every time I've ever met with the press in any of my positions, it's always been my first thing is, I will provide you all the information that I can that's publicly available on whatever issue we're talking about. Just make sure that if you truncate what I say, you kind of keep the context. Nothing like being quoted out of context and then it looks like something completely different than what you were saying. I think I've had pretty good relationships with the press in that regard. Again, sometimes it's a learning curve. You might have someone who's one of the newer junior reporters and they've got your community and it's like you're talking about process to, let's say, increase fees for sewer service or looking at doing a project that's going to be paid for through special assessments levied against the individual property owners. Sometimes explaining some of that government jargon and processes to someone who's a layman, virtually otherwise, and making sure they're able to convey that to the paper that in a way that makes sense is a little challenging, but it's no different, I think, sometimes than teaching anyone in any other given situation. So I like to have that kind of the back and forth rapport with them. I don't generally go out of my way to call them up every week and say, hey, here's what's going on. But if we have some type of system set up where they get like the agenda, or they maybe I like to give a written report to the board each meeting, or at least once a month, depending on how often the board or commission meets. I like to give a written report kind of on a status of projects and what things are going on. And sometimes I've had reporters get that when it's posted with the packets and say, oh, what can you update me on this? And I'll give them information on that and talk to them about it. If we do have a big announcement, then putting together a press release and getting it to them. I've done that before too. For example, one community, we added paramedic service to our fire and EMS. So sent out with the assistance of the fire chief on writing it. I sent it out to him, let him know exactly what that meant for us. It's
to get that word out there. Right now, it seems like in the community I'm in, being in the part of where we are in a larger area of Madison and Dane County, we're kind of ignored. So I'm lucky if I can get them to call me, except as soon as they read that PSC is considering raising your water rates. Can you tell us about that? Yes, it amounts to $6 a month on the average bill. But it says 30%, but that's only one part of the bill, so hey. So you have to put it in perspective and just respond to those questions. And in other ways, I'm really looking at developing our social media, using our some of our personnel to maybe put together a quarterly newsletter and start getting our own press out there, because if they're not going to care or come to us for the good news and only look for the bad, then you've got to kind of get the word out there some other way.
Okay. I don't know if you read about this at all in your research, but we don't always have the best luck with talent recruitment. So describe the process you would utilize to recruit and select talented staff to work for the county.
Well, it kind of depends also on what level you're looking at. With department heads, depending on how specialized the position is, sometimes I have engaged recruiters to assist. When we were looking for a fire chief, we actually engaged a recruiting company that was a retired fire chief and a retired assistant chief from some other large communities. They came in and they did a whole on-site like tabletop assessment and like a practical exercise. We had interviews, we had panel interviews, we had meetings with the board. I mean, we went through a lot of ways to vet and try to figure out who was really qualified there. We ended up actually hiring one of the candidates who was an internal promotion, but we wanted to make sure that we got the best for us, and we felt like the process we went through achieved that. Similarly, now in other cases, like let's say a public works director that I hired once, we went through a similar process, but we did it internally, so far as it was myself and members of the Public Works Committee that went through the process. And we engaged some people, some individuals from the public, some citizens, to be on the interview panel. And there, a lot of what I was looking for was based on, I wanted someone who was knowledgeable of current practices and current new innovations and such, and wanted to get their feedback and on what they were doing in their other departments where they were working in leadership roles to achieve either monitoring of their resources, getting to know the benchmarks again. I wanted to know, have you been tracking things like how much salt you use per square mile to when you're plowing snow and such? How are your costs? Are you monitoring your fuel uses and your consumption and such? I wanted somebody who could think out of the box like that. So, we went through the whole process, and we got someone that the committee felt strongly for, and I made the recommendation, and we hired him. So.
Okay. Go ahead, Bob.
Have you had very much dealings with labor unions and contract negotiations? We have 13 bargaining units and 2 associations here, so it's quite the challenge. So.
Yep. I've had experience with the bargaining units, police and fire mostly, in our cases. Right before I started working in Wisconsin, the public workers did have unions, but then they were changed a few years ago by legislative changes in Wisconsin, so they're not really represented now. Some of them still have, like for example, in some communities, like one of the communities I was in, they still passed on a lot of those benefits to them when they amended their personnel policies to give them some of the same benefits and protections that they had earlier. But for example, one of my communities, the first year I was there, police and fire both came up for negotiating for new contracts, and we got both of the unions to agree to start paying into their retirement, same as the other employees were doing. We had to offset that with some step increases over time. We also had, there was a very generous provision in the fire contract that allowed a firefighter with up to 15 years or more to have basically 45 full and 45 half days, is what they called it, of sick leave at 15 years each year. And basically with that kind of, and they could accrue that so far as, that was the max they could accrue. So if you had someone who came in on January and said, I'm going to retire at the end of the month, February, you're paying them out for almost 6 months. And so what we, though the community had run into that problem before, they did have a fund set aside to meet some of those obligations of somebody retiring and having to pay out that unused health. What we did was we set up that any new hires, once the contract went into effect, would be under a different method of accrual. So that way, the older group of 5 or 6 that were in the department already, they were protected with what they had, but any of the newer ones that came in were going to have basically a similar system of paid time off that a lot of the other employees were using, but also the police were using in a modified form of. So we felt satisfied with that.
Okay. Yes. Brian, if we Googled you, what are we going to find?
You're probably going to find a lot of references to Brian Wilson concerts and tickets.
True.
But,
what do we find exactly you? And what are we going to find?
Are we going to find any pictures of you dancing the fandango or doing anything crazy?
No, not unless my kids get on Facebook or something, but otherwise, no.
No hidden lurking problems that are going to surprise us?
No. As a matter of fact, let's see. I would say that used to I would do that periodically. I forgot there's a term for it. The kids call it something.
Yeah.
But I've done it before. You know, it's like, I think I found one obscure article with me when I was in the city of St. Louis, and it was, I was quoted in an article that was about this problem property landlord that we had in the community, and I basically just said that it was an ongoing problem and that we were dealing with it. I think I got quoted talking about swine flu, and I found that in an article a few years ago.
Bad.
A few years ago. And then, it's just, I think I told James this. I said, there's nothing out there that I'm embarrassed about or anything. Sometimes it's just, you get a meeting and there's somebody and they want to bring up some issue and make it into some kind of like grandstanding talking point. And then the newspaper leads with a headline of, "Oh, fireworks at the meeting," and it's like, but I'm always respectful and such. I think in that case, though, I was trying to make a point, and the person kept interrupting me, and so I said, "Let me finish," and I kept going with it. But no drunk driving, nothing like that.
Good. Tom, go ahead.
Okay. From time to time here in Grand Traverse County, we hire outside attorneys, sometimes consultants that stay for a while, different contractors, and it affects the way that we operate, because it's like some of those people have quite a bit of say, and they're not employees, and then we have this large group of employees, and I'm just wondering sometimes, are we ahead by contracting out and not having our own employees do some of the work, if it's not just something unique, that you have to hire somebody from the outside for. But have you gone through that very much when you were in Beloit, where you had to make decisions about, should I add employees, should I hire people from the outside? It's kind of it's a difficult decision sometimes.
Well, for example, we had I'm going to say, when it's specialized, there we had for example, we had a contract with a regular municipal attorney who was local, who did local practice, but was also attended and worked with our things. But then again, we also had, for personnel issues and for labor union contracts, we had a labor law attorney that was out of some firm out of Milwaukee that we would use for special occasions. We just kind of had them on retainer, and we would do that periodically. Like you said, it was specialized, and very rarely did we use them, maybe once a year. In that kind of case, if it's something where you couldn't really justify having a full-time employee on on the payroll to do that, I would say then definitely you want to go with the outside service.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes it's not even management. It could be your custodial services.
And you would have to look at that. Look at the size of your organization and whether or not it makes sense. I have been in a community before where they decided to take trash collecting out of Public Works and basically sell all the vehicles to a private company who became the hauler on the contract. Part of that deal was they took the employees too. They'd made some changes there. I outsourced payroll services in town of Beloit because we had one person who did that, and it was about half their time, and the rest of the time they were basically they managed our recycling grant that we got from the state, which is really a lot of getting reports from the haulers and filing annual reports with the state and such. And when that person left and we kind of had an opening there, I basically took over for managing that grant, and we decided, I talked to our finance, or our treasurer and finance director, and said, does it make sense to get someone else part-time to do this, or is this something we can do locally? So we started priced it out to like the nationwide companies like ADP, and we also priced it out to a couple local accountants. And one of the local accounting firms said, we can do this for you at so much per employee per month, and it was a substantial savings. We were looking at paying maybe $12,000 a year for payroll services versus paying someone $28,000 to $35,000 a year in salary plus benefits. So, definitely made sense in that regard. It meant, though, we also had to divide some other duties and such around. We had to make sure that we had somebody still who was managing personnel files and coordinating, but that just became one of the part-time bookkeepers that worked for our treasurer to be able to handle some of that paperwork.
Okay, let's go with Dan.
Okay, sure. That's fine.
Dan.
Thank you. I'll defer to you, though, if you want. All right. Thank you for coming. My concern is when I look at just your last job, you've been there a couple of years, you have 25-plus employees, you have a $5.5 million budget. That's 5% of the employees we have and 12% of the budget we have. So coming for this job, the job you have now, to the county is quite a quantum leap. So what can you tell me that would make me think that you're up to this job?
Well, one of the first things I learned in leadership classes with the Army was that people only have a very small area of influence that they can actually control directly, usually about 5 to 7 people. That's why most of your squads are 10 people with 2 team leaders and divvied on down from there. Right now, I don't directly supervise 25 people. I directly supervise my department heads, and those are the employees under them. In a lot of regards, that's going to be the same way with a county government. You're going to have department heads that are going to be running the day-to-day operations. I think the advantage I have coming from smaller organizations is that I've actually been out in the field and watched people repair water mains and have to make sure that they're out there following safety practices, that they have proper shoring for a trench. Even in the town of Beloit, when we worked with the county to revise our regional water quality plan, the larger cities were sending public works directors and such. My public works director was there with me because we needed somebody high in leadership that could make some decisions, and I was there for that. So the advantage in being a smaller community and wearing lots of hats is that I've got a better appreciation of what's going on inside those departments, but I would still be counting on my department heads to run their departments and report to me, and that would be no different than whether I've got 25 or 500 employees. Budget-wise, what I've found in government so far is, you've got your general fund and your proprietary funds. The main difference between your between your revenues and your expenditures in a smaller community or in a large county is the number of zeros. Because a lot of your sources are still the same. You're either getting shared revenue from the state, or federal grants, or state grants, or tax revenue. The difference is your mill rate is based off billions versus hundreds of millions. And your expenditures for public safety might be 10 million instead of 1 million. You know, but still, it's when it comes to crunching those numbers, there's, well, I've been doing a lot of it myself where I am now because I am the treasurer and the clerk also. But, you know, with the finance director and the other people there to pull that information together, I can still, you know, I can still see that we have a shortfall, we need to raise rates or look at fees, or we need to look at structures for better ways to manage our debt. I think, yeah, I'm not daunted by the idea of coming to a county.
Thank you, good answer. Thank you.
Cheryl?
Well, I was just going to ask you how you would describe yourself. How would you describe yourself and your personality? Because as someone who works with people all the time who are putting on, you know, when you're in the criminal justice system or when you're working in law, lots of times you're meeting people who are trying to be something that they're maybe not. And we get an hour with you. So how do you see yourself, and how do you describe your personality, and what are you really like?
Well, my kids will say I'm boring.
Expected.
But, I'm not always like the most outgoing person, so far as sometimes you kind of have that a little bit of that shyness comes in sometimes. But, you know, once I walk in and size up things, you know, and see that everybody's not going to bite my head off, I'm usually pretty good. I've learned with the government, if you can't be in government for long if you don't have a sense of humor. I take challenges and changes and problems in stride. It's, I would say what you would find is that I'm very thoughtful, I'm easygoing, my employees generally like me. I'm not a micromanager. I expect that a level of professionalism from them. I expect that they've been here and they've got some experience. They should know what they're doing. Doesn't mean I'm not going to correct them if I see them doing something really wrong. But and sometimes, you know, I've seen, you know, employees that aren't in the right place, and I'm able to approach them and say, have you thought about possibly doing this job instead? That might be a better fit for you, you know. I like to give people chances. I know what you mean so far as I think about sizing people up. I used to feel that way when I worked with liquor control, because if I walked in and the bar owner was happy to see me, then it meant he was either yanking my chain or trying to cover something up. I like the guys who were just basically, what do you want? Because at least I knew they were being honest. They didn't like me being there, and they were pretty open about it, you know. I'm pretty easy to work with, but I'm also easy to, I can also lay down the law and tell somebody that you're doing something illegal. If we catch you again, we're going to prosecute. I just had that conversation last week with a developer. A general contractor, basically their plumber, was bypassing, instead of asking for a meter and getting a meter installed, they were putting in what they had a little pipe they called a jumper, basically, to get service without paying for it on the construction side. And one time would have been an oversight. 5 times? No, that's a trend. So we had to sit down with them and say, we see this again, we're going to start pulling permits. We're going to start revoking permits, and we're going to start you all over on some of your fees. So you threaten a pocketbook, and I think we'll be good for now. But
Okay.
so I'm pretty good to work with.
Excuse me.
Bless you.
Thank you.
Bob?
As you can see, there's 7 of us on the board. Basically, we'll be telling you what to do. How will you take if you have what you think's a great idea, and we just say, you know, that's not really something that we think is good? Because it's going to happen at some point, maybe not.
And it's happened before. And usually what happens is, I like to get feedback. What do you not like about the idea? And then I might go back and do some more research and try to see if there's something that I can find that might smooth over any misgivings you have about the idea. I've been going through that with a depot that we're trying to restore, the historic depot. One of the first questions that I got when the Community Development Agency decided, hey, we want to acquire this and we want to take on the historic renovation of it, one of my board members said, yeah, but what if the planned development doesn't happen and we're stuck with a building and nobody in there to take over running it? So we went back and did some more research and found that there might actually be other grant funds we can go for without having to have someone lined up for that, and made it more palatable and more less risky, I should say. So, you know, now we're moving forward with, you know, we applied for the grants, or now we're just waiting to see what they say. Like I said, I've been told lots of times that sometimes my ideas, you know, we don't like the idea, or we don't understand the idea, or we think it's too pie in the sky. Well, I'll try it again when the time's right, if it comes up again. But usually I've got my research all there. Hopefully I've got all your questions answered and we're ready to move forward.
Sonny, do you have anything?
Oh, if you were offered this position, when would you be available to start?
Well, with my current employment agreement, I think I've got a 30-day notice to give them. I know there's supposed to be a second round of interviews in June, so I would say probably 1st of August would be fine. I'd like to have a little bit extra time. I try to do that when I can, so I can kind of like tidy everything up with a nice bow for whoever's coming in after me, so they can follow the trail. And the last time that I was able to do a transition like that, I basically had a stack of files, each one clearly labeled with a checklist and telling them where we were and what was coming up that was due, so that anybody could follow it, whether it was the mayor or the person who replaced me. And you know, I've genuinely grown to like each community I've ever worked in. I think you become intimate with the board, and with the people, and their wants and their desires and what they want to see happen with their community, and I like trying to achieve those with them, those goals with them. So leaving it is always kind of bittersweet, and want to make sure that they have a smoothest possible transition going forward as they can.
Sonny, how about your longevity question? Why don't you just go into that one?
All right, you know, this, as I've explained to the other ones, I've sat here long enough. This is my 6th round of interviewing people for the county administrator's position. We're going to hire the 6th county administrator that I've sat on this board through. My goal is to find a county administrator that's going to bring stability to this community for 10 years or more. Are you that guy?
I think so, as long as I don't do something completely that you don't like and you get rid of me in 2 years or 4 years.
We might not all be sitting here.
I'll be here for a while. You know, the way I look at it is, with the longevity on the men in my family, on both my mom and my dad's side, if my uncles are anything to be an example, I might work another 40 years. Somebody asked me and said, well, won't you want to retire at least by the time you're 70? And I'm like, why? I don't play golf well, and fish don't like me, so I don't know why I would possibly do that. I said, they're probably going to come in one day to my office and find me killed out on the floor and say, all right, he's retired now. But no, as I stated here, I would like to go someplace where I can say, this is my last move and this is where I'm going to finish my career. And I would say I've got at least, I'd like to say, Yeah, I'm halfway through. I've got at least 20 more years in me.
Okay. Ron, any questions?
Well, I just, in bringing that up, looking at your past jobs, you've got, 2 years, 3 years. You do have six years and 4 years at different jobs. I would like to think that an administrator, we selected you, that you could be here for upwards of 10 years before moving on, but obviously it's going to be up to you and the board at that time.
Well, and, I don't know what the most recent professional statistic is, but a few years back, I think ICMA, which is International City Management, had put out that the average tenure was 4 to 5 years for managers at the time. And I'll tell you, in 2012, when a lot of new people were coming on the boards across the nation, I saw a lot of people that were in places 15, 20 years just all of a sudden being said, all right, we're going a different direction, and find themselves out. I think right now, if my board in town of Lloyd hadn't changed, I'd probably still be there. When I went to Belleville, they kind of said it right at the beginning. They said, well, we're a smaller community. People want to get their feet wet here and move on, so we don't expect to see you that long. But I'd like to be there what I can, and generally speaking, under our code of ethics, they want you to give each community at least 2 years to really get adjusted to you. And I feel like I've kind of done that here, and frankly, I've kind of went backwards on my career path. I went to a smaller community, and it's a little detour for me, so I'm looking to get back on track there. And frankly, if I'd had management positions in St. Louis, I probably would have still been there, but it really wasn't gonna happen for me. I had applied for some positions as executive assistants for some of the department heads and such, but really they didn't really consider the master's degree in there. They considered your experience within city government itself, and frankly, I wasn't already in a position where I was managing a budget directly, so they didn't, there was no chance there. So it was just like, well, you either get it, or you know the right people, or whatever, or you don't. So yeah, and like I said, the 1.5 years with City of Crothersville, I was grant funded, and once that was over with, it was pretty much done. So,
all right, thank you.
Any other questions? I have one more. If you were offered the position, is there anything that would cause you not to accept it? Have you checked out our community and housing and things like that? Do you see any obstacles to you accepting the position?
And I've looked at all that. I've looked at cost of living. I've looked at available housing. My wife and I have already discussed and said that, it's going to be on those transitional type things, because regardless, before we can make any permanent move, we go to sell a house there. We have some loose ends there with her job, but I said, for me, all it's going to take me is a U-Haul and a trailer to pull my Explorer up here, and that's and then I'm here pretty much. So.
Okay. Great. So, do you have another question, Bob?
Nope.
Do you have any questions for us?
Well, and I think we kind of touched around a little bit. I've read up on some of the information about the plan and such, so far as meeting your unfunded liabilities with your pensions, and I've been reading up on the pension situation in general with Michigan. I think every state went through a similar problem when the recession hit, so far as losing a lot of their funding in their pension plans. But here, because there's a lot of that local responsibility for that funding, that it's you guys have been hit pretty hard. Are you satisfied with the current plan and steps that have been taken, or do you think it still needs to be refined more?
I like the plan that we have. We have the plan for $5.9 million a year for 16 years. This is the first year of that. I wish that we had a plan for the other post-employment benefits, and we should have a more concrete plan for that. We kind of hashed around a lot of different things that we could do. We hashed around with millage and bonding and things like that, and this is currently what we settled on. So personally, and I'm only one of 7, I like the plan. I like the flexibility of, we have put 5.9 in, and we can budget for that. If we find that we can get more in there, and it's advantageous to do that, then we should do that. So it's not so planned out that we can't work with it, in my opinion. Bob?
Yeah, I was gonna say, I like the plan, but it will take every year looking at it. Where are you? What do you need to add extra? Where, how did we fare over the years? I think when the next evaluation comes out, I expect us to be close to 60%. And I don't think we really need to be 100%. I'm one of those guys that thinks 75 to 80% is probably good. You don't want to throw away too much money into that, because we do have a finite life, of that. So most of it, most of the groups have been closed. So it was a good plan. It's going to be a continual look for the next 10, 12 years. So.
Yeah, I would tell our new administrator that we need to give the plan time. That we decided to accept a plan, and the board agreed on it, and it hasn't been enforced that long, and it's going to take some time to see how it works, rather than to make a quick decision on that. I think a quick decision wouldn't be right. That we need to use that plan for a while and give it some time so it can prove itself, basically.
Dan?
In terms of that, I like the original plan incorporated a pension advisory board that would evaluate our pension problems every year and give us advice and report to the community, to the board, and to the employees, so that we'd have transparency and information. In the past, one of the reasons we got in this trouble was that nobody was really looking at it. So I like to see that pension advisory board be appointed and used. Also, there was a irrevocable trust that I like to see funded, because as the market goes up and down, and it will go down again, MERS is going to come back to us asking for more money. And I like to have some stable money set aside, not risked very high, so that when that inevitably happens, we can reach into that savings account and fund the 5.9 million to a little bit more as asked by MERS. So I'd like to see us implement the rest of the plan. We've implemented 2/3 of it. I'd like to see the last third implemented.
Anybody else?
I guess what I would say in regard to the pension debt plan, I really trust the plan that we have. I'm not sure that I trust the organization that's managing our pension liability. The whole plan is based on their projected return on revenues, which I don't believe are correct. I believe they're overestimated, and I'm concerned with that. The idea that we signed into a program that we're going to pay $5.9 million, I'm very happy with that part. The idea that they are basing their projections on the fact that they're going to get a 7.75% return on the money, I don't know that I trust that. Not within our control, but yet that's the projections that were used when they came up with the idea. And I have to say that for many years, we could not get MERS to even come to the table and talk about it. But we did have, over the last year and a half or so, been able to do that. So we at least have a plan in place, and we've addressed that plan. That the pension debt was always there. Whether or not anyone ever believed the numbers that were there, and the whole idea that, everyone was projecting the idea that you had to be 100% funded. Well, if you were 100% funded, every employee of Grand Traverse County who's ever worked for the county is going to draw their maximum benefits until they're 88.7 years old.
Right.
And that's not going to happen. So there's no purpose to be 100% funded. And some of that money is not going to be paid out for another 20 years. Why do they need it today? Especially, at least in my mind, and it's strictly my opinion, based on their investment performances, that concerns me the most.
I was just wondering, because, that obviously is a frequent topic that you see when you do a Google, so I was just wondering, kind of get a feeling where everybody felt now. Because I saw the original plan, but I didn't.
You Googled us, huh?
Of course.
And we had some heated discussions about it. I mean, but they were good discussions. We talked several times about 4-3 votes, and a lot of times I think some of our best work is when we have 4-3 votes, because all the sides get discussed.
Sometimes it scares me when you have a lot of discussions and there's never any dissenting opinions and never any.
We don't have that.
Oh, you'll be happy. You'd like
When
it
you do
here.
that, it's like, that's not healthy either.
No,
I mean,
but-
it's nice to be able to work out differences and discuss problems and move forward, but to always agree is like, well, that's not always necessarily the best thing either, because sometimes you get in that mindset of, oh, we don't see it. And
So my goal as the chair is usually to, if you're walking out and you're one of the three, at least you were heard, and at least we know why you're one of the three that voted the other way. So that's important too, that everybody is heard.
Well,
Any other questions? Or?
No, and I think the only thing I would leave you with is, I take on every community I've ever been in. I want to be a part of them. I've participated in various civic organizations and on boards, volunteer boards currently, and I would put the same heart and dedication into this as I have anywhere else, and I'm committed to service. I'm dedicated to my profession. I want to be the best I can be at what I do. I want to provide you good results, and that's what I pledge to do my best.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you for making the trip. Thank you very much
Thank you for having me.
coming.
Thank you for being here so late with me.
No problem.
Nice to meet you.
Bonnie, do we recess till tomorrow or adjourn for today and restart?
The way it's got, it's posted as two separate meetings. So we
okay.
are going to adjourn.
So now's our chance for public comment, and that does not mean any of my people sitting out there. No, sit
No,
down.
you cannot censor.
Sit down. Sit down, please.
You may speak your mind at public comment.
No, not them. So no public comment.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. So we are adjourned. See you tomorrow at 4 o'clock. Bonnie's not going to let you get up and...